Gotcha.
So I was,
Thank you.
rather than move my thing, I thought it would be easier to move the desk.
I like these debates. You don't have to worry about how you go to basketball school.
Oh, no.
Yeah, big fan. I mean, we have shady villages.
Anyone have spare flow paper? I have some that's glossy and I can use flow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have enough to spare? I don't want to take it as a junk. But if
We've got a
somebody-
lot.
You have a lot, okay. That would
I just have a lot of,
Thank you.
it's a little bit.
Somehow I grabbed a little bit and it ended up being like a glossy texture and that's the worst. Thank you so much.
What? Thank you.
Big dog. It's big dog.
We don't say like rock chalk to each other, is that all you people say?
No.
It's a long story. We say big dog, it's over, we see the big dog. What can I say? I sent the winning seat.
I was gonna make a joke like it was. That's me. I'm really happy you did that. Be nice.
Everybody have the one you see?
I don't have it either. I did get it. Although it's in debate docs if you have a filter.
Yeah, if you could. That is so
Weird to make us not going.
Yeah, I always have it skip my inbox, which is honestly sometimes very frustrating.
in spam or something. No, you just have to start stage 3. Might be enough.
I haven't got it yet. I'm with Heather.
We'll give it a sec.
It was, you put repko.debate at Gmail.
Okay. That's a good start.
You know, we should have done G. We should have done the PPI. Well, you and I.
I don't know, we're out. How can I take that?
Are we doing it?
Really? I think we need 0 the federal citizen.
Too late. Repko, let me know you have. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I haven't.
You know, I wrote that.
That is weird that it went to debate docs, but not ever all the normal emails.
Do you have us like blocked or something?
Don't tell me.
All my
If you
different
officially
filters.
To clarify, it did go to me, it's just that I have a filter that sends debate docs, like
Yeah.
things that are also on debate docs to different folder, so I did, yes, anyway. I thought someone else might have also said that.
Yeah, that's probably what I'm saying. I'm not.
Oh, I'll post it in my version, okay.
Hopefully it won't have that kind of lag as debate.
Yeah, for some reason my normal email got it just now, my debate docs email got it like 5 minutes ago.
Oh, maybe debate docs has some special powers in that also.
Okay.
Is anyone not ready?
The United States should adopt a nuclear first use policy restricting the first use of its nuclear forces against the People's Republic of China and finish what is crisis relieving its collapsing between the US and China as the incidents sparked nuclear use. 2020 Washington is concerned Beijing use force to overturn the regional status of US and Asia. Beijing defends itself from its US missile defense, looking to each nuclear turn use. China increases readiness to resolve could be determined as a preparation for escalation. US conventional strikes against bases containing nuclear missiles could be determined as precursors to nuclear weapons. This calculation of military actions may force escalation and increase the risk of nuclear threat will be cross China. Cyber space attacks targeting nuclear command control trigger nuclear missile balance on distance the counter when military units could occur. Risk and crisis accommodation with first calculation accident justifies concerns. Multiple hotspots like conflict and now looking to 23 China's military engaged with proactive behavior to point aircraft and one firing missiles aimed at Japan's easy discuss authority and the ICS laws by reducing overreaction to propagations and security ultimately points to the border. China leading Russell Park celebrated hypersonic weapons. She's well distributed to be before the important that term. One in SCS fighting scientists as a China's facing humidity and agreement soul and other sort of vessels with the U.S. Central Region on Edge worldwide by 2025 and China's leaders were confidence level. She called out U.S. officials they must fight the U.S. could feasibly use first in a sudden conventional conflict between 21 the U.S. economy if use after for planning to defend Taiwan expressed interest in the anti-tactical victory options how would leadership respond to the event an unexpected reversal of China was the same years ago comparatively with more fatalities and rocket would be joined the American public against with the military support sufferers of lawsuits and the viable tactical options according to the young include submarine launch of the war China's reserves noted these things U.S. nuclear use likely mutual and if you calms crisis perceptions prevents U.S. first strike and starts a dialogue and if you credibility that should cover 2021 Biden and she discussed strategic stability shocks by the efforts called to read their belief in nuclear war methods on the pre-fought but stocks for the agenda for continuing to stability because the sign of U.S. reciprocal and if you to craft confidence measures reinforce movement of you to point now actions that you work China use arisen in new tech AI computer instability on new platforms start a war that has to teach usage rise get rapidly like using new weapons could rise China members to use intentions also new weapons also be destroyed the United States will see China's preparation law of done nuclear weapons preparation for nuclear weapons so strike first China's already enforced their side of a mutual and if you lack of U.S. reciprocation forces them to backslide down to for regime and then if you can basically not to mutual vulnerability the foundation first for the mutual and if you use concerns about first strike now when the more lax fostering must security forces as a common idea tends to use first now the word of it currently call it mutual and if you would imagine mutual new use will eventually be less concerned to track the fourth time modernization China should release or credible and if you try to build understanding China cares mostly with the use maybe toward the topic about and if you mutual and if you use credible I generally less like the use of ever deliberately get back to the nuclear strike China figures with use the any future strong conversions to assist in about use nuclear weapons influenced by the type of given destructive impact to the angels to the some deep average of first use of police efficacy next essential to the rule of political leaders institutions we bring even one bomb with the country really catastrophic and if you relative to China and U.S. virtual practice but the proximity policy both being clarified for interpretations of each other's doctrines with China and the U.S. need to appreciate risk of every reward to do this calculation but the immediate question is whether any of as a declaration of enforcement can be special simply moving sufficient to first stability starting from moving with use and China sufficiently shared faith in the sanctity and energy to be exploring community statistics of future foster and follow their advantage to its moderation Chinese nuclear bombs inevitable and half-assed occurs depends on U.S. posture Santor 19 faster because the Chinese arsenal could be in the worst including in low posture use has to be recommended newly after the U.S. and DR 2018 research after arsenal goes questions of whether it's been half-assed even China's going to use all after just supposed to be factory to reconcile low with any dual the jury still of these zero changes reaching across those questions of whether reports of two radical changes remain changed after the positive China's force made the force of the negative outcomes possible this is to lead to arms a faster bomb is driven by U.S. first use causes AI integration of nuclear early warning and conventional systems solid 18 nuclear coercion into the escalated conventional conflict customer regimes use certain regimes between nuclear arsenal into the modest space process of U.S. foreign nuclear contracts activates of the sort of the smell spills over China concerns the ability for the warning strikes to strike is increasing AI production and forming off-guard by food effect AI for regimes to strike off the strengths mission ability China be low from China based on automation being low small platforms for China's Asian methods to advance on set forms and other fuels from innovation against U.S. potential escalation of doctrine and policies indicates the start of one arms system losses and systems back to behavior shaped the 7% of this comes through AI extinction China is capable of 22 escalation lead up existential threat to civilization and then she reversed the pathway to evolve the limited secretary of atmosphere replace adversary pressure to repress risk between many forces that connect state from these AI nuclear arms of autonomous nuclear readers forms of dreams laws future penalties and safety and space lead up existential risk versus interest in AI brings to the leader in this world currently that rushes AI is its early stage shortfalls in terms of resource lacking scientists only China has to down for workers when it's not accessible risk or life unfortunately hurdles with the responsible issue of neutral China is already making heavy rocket force of the air including risk considering the U.S. and Europe is limiting China's translated models for Europe's expertly from China is a look at it with photograph machine learning there is a risk of intelligizing weapons in ways to measure things that versus the active China is not yet really actually used to reduce the sex fighting that you could run on suppressing the prayer for a first strike developed tech to bypass the American shield. U.S. first strike launcher pushes the field toward launch on warning if you're working 24. The desire for more robust second strike to be the main driver 22 to force collaborative to the instead of advisors to opportunities of service and lobbying concern about U.S. nuclear force. Weapons China is able to reduce efforts of low unit China is able to see weapons going to be used after the low threshold for use weapons in the apparent China's stability. Efforts in modernization incredibly linked to concerns about sex strike use out of the field average risk conventional missiles China's efforts of older readiness is driven by severely concerns China and after the weak risk of accidental nuclear use of little evidence transfer to exchange might ever develop under options. Most likely future shift to China's virtue usually China adopting though. The plan was for slow modernization which dislodges Chinese early warning average down 20 times would do the same to U.S. universities so that would be the most important strategy to take over research China regarding U.S. intentions. Russian universities be dismissed as running the intentions of China's faulty impact on culture which have lived days and then China's has to change the policy of evidence university change the culture and the research agreement under to the impacts of universities know what is China's taking universities through timely actions to digital police reach early warning system contrary pressures for changes of the first China's historic codes to affect nuclear decision making advantage to these relations and if you is a critical benchmark for China in bilateral nuclear negotiations relations are collapsing now because of years of Rizzo clock in 21 while China was weak relations were cultural at times change relations China is rapidly sharing by and bringing past China relations as a sort of the transparent on first user obstacles to negotiations use their first user over the China or feudal China plus your use calling on first user and a benchmark user piece that and if the Chinese government is ability to engage in discussions on nuclear users or users use was set aside first uses clear signal US to dominate China will be treated as an evil and if use key to refuse every initiative until the US commits country to opportunity there is a in need of when the administration due to his Chinese fear of a hostile U.S.-China segregated dialogue defines a relationship first, but I think China is how instead China is a solution back to and therefore Cuba's powers and thinking powers will switch to change news perception. So you some favor responsibility come with the issues or issues administration construction is willing to listen and engage with acceptable to China here to China as well as discuss with issues related to Cuba accept a small number of China's favorite topics like first use of time to engage China on the favorite side topics consider viable when first use made the gesture that that who was starting discussion of plans specifically on launch Chinese call by North Korean nuclear lines finished in Commerce 23 spot blue rather the American politics absence of the conflict between the U.S. and China states recommend draft off and Brock's raising might include violent reviews Chinese thought Chinese use weapons first against each other allies and methods used in China convert to the union so we just justify crossing nuclear thresholds such understanding using China contribute to the specific foreign system through the lines of nuclear weapons used in China to reduce denuclearization of the event. So while the move is probably given to all agreements not using getting China or removed with sanctions, it's going to get creative negotiation channel insider 20 pressure was a critical factor that influenced Cuban pursuit diplomacy in 2017, but North Korea's sanction division as well as relaxed Chinese well-blended effectiveness in past years active negotiation war cooperative from China. This is a nuclear target is anti 2017 over the US goal be to persuade China's advanced feeling was of nuclear or intolerable. It was China competition with close North Korean negotiation sanctions would have been impossible that China for China use North Korea the blessing competition with US China reserve North Korea's a buffer unless US facing concession on the issue important to China. Unchecked North Korean nuclear advances causing sanctions territory to be can oversaw solid fuel rocket crucial nuclear solid fuel rockets to be our really hard to check the nuclear probably entry more change during this conflict calling all ICBMs during this under liquid fuels now for single nuclear protect solid fuel has no good available capital to president the vessels beyond the nuclear is naturally battlefield use regime and since the difference between the development of really armed vessels need to deploy the skill that can make the ability to use its nuclear and not retaliate as a glory to be a president even if active potential of conflict destroying WD actively war history by the Anglo Sailors which is calculations of catastrophic conflict and if you solve North Korean cooperation government centers and let me use China to agree mutual assurance and enter into bilateral free use of the biggest step US and China fought and the first use should insist China be a partner in nuclear conflict the first nuclear versus the president's funny your pushing close to the culture and words sanction North Korea by seeing the China's US but expects to partner in proliferation back to advantage 2 Chinese nuclear mod includes new dangerous multiple independent re-entry vehicle missiles to launch 19 China's upgrades new shift away from any few many changes can be defensive in front of one of your largely or it is part of the use of defensive stage of the Chinese concern in missile defense we talked US nuclear first China's upgrades understood his efforts to see in the credibility retaliation nuclear threats and cyber war China first with confidence increase use religious value adoption versus wave insurance spreading when has been a strict defenses this has nothing to do with China first regularly suggesting same concern that China will say this trying to turn this up because the US does not reach a more religious impression use to really get executed first strike against China. China's murders aren't yet coming in FUB destabilizing but further on causing no back crises nuclear war found in 22. The goal of China's weapons remains to do with the aftermath of US invasion boundaries and remains committed to NEG China's relation to US as a treaty level recent times progressive US being used China's assurance and state with the terms that opposite the China's been developing conclusion against probability mercer. For further escaping BMD from the signal US case for Chinese songs with more accounting to being able to perfect missiles that teach will carry 10 more heads troops and deliver for dealing murders increase substitutes against as a good full time sounding this knowledge chain reaction popular music pretty pushing issues such as destabilizing the future of new control which meant easy US and China tensions India Pakistan war causes extinction Trump moving runway 18 India Pakistan are supposed to when they have ever been even eliminated change and life of the planet countries may first escalate nuclear combinations so good supply some of the ancient 50 rounds to do so much attempts fall with the assets ready level food as inflation radiation conflict could result in really focus on the food industry global fan bilateral and if you solve reducing this for Chinese border conversation and prevent security level spillovers to India, Pakistan, after 16 China's border missiles are intended to counter US missile defense. Shooting Delhi, Fury, China, Universe could have been distributing the team result. Default like India by Pakistan versus China, US anti-bomber station to reverse that reaction and effectiveness in publishing the state guys restrained posture. For acceptation China's posture by the basic India to Pakistan, the nuclear style, India, Pakistan, Virginia, Washington, China's organization indicates leaders where its forces vulnerable to US perspective, especially because China's identity with the US is not to be increasing crisis, which is why obviously China is going to lead to level for China, especially play for and a bilateral NFU. Marked at bilateral NFU.
Okay. Good.
Yep.
Okay. Let's talk about advantage 1. The Dunn evidence has a line where it's like increases in readiness and spirals to like all the other things that Dunn lists. What is the increase in readiness?
China putting its forces on a higher alert level. So that could take the form of dispersing missiles or flushing stuff.
So it's not about the United States doing that, it's just China?
I think that says that the U.S. would misinterpret Chinese efforts to ensure survivability.
Oh, so if we win launch on warning defense to advantage 2, both advantages go away, is that accurate?
Yeah, we think the U.S. would first strike in a conflict for other reasons.
Okay.
You asked me about one.
Actually, let's actually talk about that. The internal link to that, the Sweeney card is like the United States could contemplate first use. What's the prediction that Sweeney makes for why we would contemplate first use?
Because of audience costs.
Like, you're not at your laptop, but like you grabbing a line because I don't believe you.
But you mean just like what a line that says what is possible?
That says the United States would actually do it.
This is debate. Evidence speaks in probabilistic terms, and this indict will apply.
Well, no. It is literally an article that is like a hypothetical war game about if a United States-China war happened. It does not. It is like literally a war game. It is a person making a statement that is like, if this were the case, then this is what would happen. Why do you think that would be the case? Like, why?
Well, and the scenario it says is if a conventional conflict with China happened and they did something like strike a U.S. carrier and kill a bunch of
The
soldiers,
conventional
that would
conflicts,
obviously create
so
audience costs.
the conventional conflicts that your cave evidence cites is likely to start are in places like Cambodia, the South China Sea, and Vietnam. Why are the United States involved in any of these places?
I think you're also overlooking things like the SES, the ECS, or Taiwan.
Those are bodies of water, and maybe Taiwan I'll give you, but
I think, if you're,
like I'm not AFF.
if your argument is that naval disputes are incapable of causing war,
Okay. Predictive evidence on the relations advantage. You have evidence that says Biden would talk to China about North Korea that he wants to.
our evidence says that the plan would elicit North Korea, like, engaging in dialogue with the United States directly is not necessary for the AFF advantage, because
Wait, so China would just voluntarily sanction an ally because the United States did an NFU? Is that your
I think allies overstated North Korea as a strategic buffer for China,
Why are they sanctioning them now if they're threatening with nukes?
because it provides them leverage to hold out for an NFU.
Really? Okay. And then, what evidence is that sanctions stop North Korea from brandishing its nuclear arsenal?
Kim and Snyder say that they get Korea to the negotiating table.
Kim and Snyder says the
and-
United States and China would demand denuclearization. What card says that those demands would succeed?
Our evidence indicates that North Korea is more willing to compromise on its nuclear program when they jointly apply pressure.
You think your card says that?
Yes.
I invite all of you to explore that further.
I wanted to send, it's 5, and then China modernization, and then relations. 1, 2.
I got your email much faster.
Ha, gotcha, girl. What is that? Kansas.
We're ready.
Okay, good.
First off, the trade is that Biden's avoiding being legal soft on China now, but avoiding accommodation is key here. What's well expect positive atmosphere to the submarines of clear of business and trade Biden's avoiding being legal soft on China. As you're soon realizing makes it unlikely with advocating substantial accommodation, domestic pressure make a hardly on business and candidates and policies to play one on one to assume domestic political risk and compromise resisting major changes to the behavior. The plan is going soft on China, forcing a compensating escalation on trade through 20. Biden will not the idea of Republican China and the accommodation will be classified higher pillars of all this international supervision, vacation, reduction, overseas domestic affairs could restrict the investors to divert from the trade deficit. A little kind of political consideration of accessibility items will have the ends. Have they considered inflating sentiments and home payments abroad? America will continue to deal by strong consensus. America will stay self-compatible. Rally allies consider being lower terror force, security easy tariffs, and the trade commitments will tell us to China will be better. And then trade war specifically, Biden will target clean energy exports. Every country makes climate mitigation impossible. Harvard, Blue 118. Biden is raising cars on Chinese energy products depending on undermining global value and climate change. Here, so slow down transition in the economy, successfully decarbonizing the economy, U.S. will try to China clean energy products, escalate trade war, which on first retaliation of automation trends will create robots for U.S. transition and zero economy. Station year 21 climate has potential to push across the threshold of euros will also changing. Ocean circulation causing sea level rise, increasing extreme events, advantage was then t-shirt global catastrophe occur. If you differ rapidly and simultaneously causing typical wind trigger, developing sonic and occur social breakdown. Next, office executive counterplan. The executive branch of the United States should adopt a nuclear overseas policy against the people of the Republic of China. It solves and avoids strategy and no one AC car. Since they have U.S. state form of restrictions on nuclear forces and it competes restrictions, must be Congress in this context where 20 U.S. Congress legislative restriction the first use of nuclear weapons has power as far as such restrictions would become legally bound by the obligation and Congress transgression bills would do. Depending on the purposes of past restrictions, the executive branch is not adopt the new pursuit policy over still recommendation of the wrong protocol. Next, opposite to South Korea DA. The United States should increase nuclear contingency planning by at least incorporating conventional planning with South Korea. Integrating conventional planning into nuclear consultation, patient assurance, sweet spot, but success hinges on credible commitments to get involved. 21. Although findings suggest that insurance can backfire, they do not imply weakening guarantees and surveys on this individuals likely to see credible guarantees as soon as healthy proposals sweet spot leads to comfort concerns while recognizing tangled restrictions that apply broadly to the below the level to U.S. military fund. The terms of these threats such as conquest that way, coercion likely trigger nukes and nuclear planning table, like mental terms by clarifying narrow circumstances under which U.S. nukes we use our probability to be avoided by such striking credibility. So good Poland is late now. The plan's unilateral allocation of nuclear coordination as far as Mr. Poland. Pablo also wanted you'll bring a nuclear source information published on the side. No good rights to so little legal justification. The right dealing Washington regulations shown to during from these earnings. Conducted short planning of new U.S. nuclear contingencies for being worse spread. Instead of the Congress change dramatically based on the larger U.S. arrival which protect from mounting extensive collective security related to the evidence and nukes in the upper hand. After the best use of the U.S. running proposal in these states, which is with misguided disasters, a consequence of harmless agreements, which includes the declaration of 6 years of impediment that's magnified by the unpopularity of an view towards China. Harvey 19 alliances with the set of future critical as Mr. Allies by setting corporation nuclear power countries and ensure border certainty and entities with the extended terms ago. A precedent increased nuclear presence also accomplished U.S. military housing combination with research aspects of latent new capabilities and remain waiver counts out to use nukes out and influence that energy node neutral control network and work use none of that as a view prolific ensures cascades random strikes into global nuclear war extinction movement. Shin 23 access to solution high given artificial recommends attack control software will lose enemies of fighting kinds of with the north visual the empire so go here's the north visual down your gas station has a question reality like capture consequences which will use metro words with reasons which will counter strike versus the same consular chosen you can dominate China Russia counter Japan will justify these has zeros that how its financial capabilities next office topicality no subsets no first use policy forbids no first use against any adversary under any condition Evan 21 state said have no first use policy when allowing use against air restrictions only for retail violation the plan is a subset no first use for China vote next subsets justify enemy carbon justify destroying stable link ground for core generics next officer writer said fiat makes the plan a must pass measure that causes unrelated writers to be attached with a builder consider most specialization because everyone knows the Congress passed centralization attempting to attach to number provisions that was not likely to go into necessary passage Republicans attach provisions to destroy the ESA more since 2016 a writer most specialization has been effective ESA behind the scenes pressure of Mally the government allows increased use of writers have limited bills with their attachment poison pills destroy the ESA at large Chapter 25 mission of the anti-ESA writers are attached masks spending with power blocking the false directions of 15 anti-ESA writers plus blocking protections from backpedal regulations extinction bar and Clark 23, ESA running station all under reproduction over reaches automatic limits ESA never greater events from biology climate crisis risk mitigation a temperature drought in a fire storm of floods is inherently connected to the healthy mind versus ecosystem and Congress defend the ESA color and then extinction is not an option crisis stability advantage. One, no crisis and stability, neither side is ready to start conflict. Shall 23, China's not ready for war, not coordinated like a strategy, because amount of investment conflict, versus the military, focus on the dynamic conflicts of the economic financial areas, the U.S. military treaties, taking second military action, penetration, China to presence, the agenda, the mission war, China implemented a view economy, military, not strong enough, not among the 100 richest per capita, exploding funding growth, and the 830 million China's 220 carbon power left far behind, considering like one in all strength as well as alliances, China that has not been accommodated. When worries that enemies are closing in, its defense mission going to war, lack sufficient actual exercises with the U.S. internal social class sacrifice, Chinese leaders, the resolution to command the first by China, and the sufficient diplomatic measure China has allies China will lose more than the competition to the U.S. relations to become already for China. Two is that sort of when I see cross proves our argument, their impacts are 20 data from China, conventionally attacking a U.S. carrier and their impact evidence about their part that says multiple hotspots escalate has not a single U.S. carrier near any of them. You can simply vote neg on there's not a risk of impact now for U.S. versus use Glock 23 is highly unlikely the U.S. would use nukes to try to destroy or degrade China's nuclear forces having acquired a large scale attack over the large use of mainland and have catastrophic impacts of unpredictable consequences of U.S. officials. And honestly, the question of the U.S. versus being prevented. 4, not credible. China will assume we're not serious. Council 21. No versus called no leader trying to other states issue false from the current policy to gain advantage. Others really think for low probability high conflict invested in even after the U.S. adopted first use no use with the same leaders no less confidence versus our founding conflicts for safely leading military advantages to leader wrong places trust no versus leader risks surprising to first conflicts in places structure and then less versus use of vaccine versus policy they trust require other risks that the wrong no versus budget all contain unfair to escape cause those leader variable trust policy will not change the way on their own and perpetuity modernization advantage. One, no mod impact is stabilizing and defensive. Master 23, China modernization, providing a service sector, strategic agriculture, large numbers of rebel arsenal, U.S. by those arsenals of impact, 10 no-go, increasing China's bombing capabilities, consistently measures development, pulling no defenses to 18 advances in early warning, growing ever missiles, security ability, to monitor eventually, that's the no-go, China's defense capabilities, but a large amount of stability again. Considering to try to common effective video, also that's great stability. Human information arsenals mentioned in Target used to no modernization internal link. We do not know why they're modernizing 2023. Policymakers do not know why Beijing modernizing changes do not correctly by about what arsenal trying to seek or what purpose wanting to write trying to wait, why it's basing country doing and seeking more mobile force reaction. It's more dramatic with just countries stronger shield. One possibility another is to raise the so much about possibility changes among the pure crowd. Just 3 no AI launch impact is far off and no worse than humans or busy. 18 AI one that comes to nuclear whatever and authors offer souls where very defined severe reasonable perception AI really self to really tasks that's what gets you to be incremental as well like we'll do that much as AI would you win and go on or is not in charge parties it will be a while that the human argument opinion whether good for no Chinese launch on what do you think 22 the US is on the unintentionally destroying China's counter capabilities how the size of probably safe one and special war China's family maintainment of communication restrict use to listen is zero negative control turns anyway new government never use of that out of order that secret is highly centralized China's and unable to adopt LW China's military the rest of history falls take an LW posture 5, no 8, no pack, war booster. Are focused on other things despite the inevitability of sections 2, go 23 practice. I agree to see right in India, Morocco, given defense relations, especially when I see sorry for the Boston East section, plus like Valley, one focus Pakistan. Overseeing economy, Indian challenge for China doesn't have interest in escalation, any result. Fluid Pakistan is Pakistan, Bangladesh, China, the Islam has no interest in making a fight. Have little interest in relations to getting better Pakistan if you're getting visit. Much of my bilateral achievements say no internal link to this. Either Roger Global in 23, there's little likely Pakistan will adopt that issue and you would adopt one of the very groups of Pakistan that are new faces in North Korea. Well, the conventional harmony to be India, a target large arms to counter conventional weapons, and new prevent using conventional strength as the Pakistan threat. The national sovereign could arise from India's very conventional power, finding cases inadequate. Conventional power is discharged from you trying to use first and try to whether we'll have the gumption to do so. The relations advantage one, those fail, Fiddler 23 facing decision making range of history. No significant variation China's difference in quad by minus increase in areas one. Equal relations with the Chinese counterparts including agreements and unconditional reverse including administration by Confucius institutes drawing extradition request lending these restrictions the oasis is run by desperate the oasis which is run by a block cannot be awarded to information first originally by causing deep problems down existing because China's not valuing legal cooperation. Two, so no North Korea internal links and strong links to work. Proven by when I see cause X3, also known as to Biden cooperating over North Korea. The argument is that there's no reason why Biden would actively work with China towards mitigating North Korea's government. Predicted evidence about that now for no.
Can you read the compart?
Oh, cool. 5, no North Korea internal China will co-opt 23. China is the support of Pyongyang, can execute its own goals, allowing Chinese China laws. A larger way can because all the leadership is strong measures that to oil special leadership in China. And if PRK continues in China remains in focus, a large trade partners China competition has had certain consultations on the issue before we use China. Which for sanctions in China, Russian president Trump related competition and certain discussion no go. We'll use for 5.5, no go war, lose 130. Kim will start a war decision where you check your cases that would appear to Arab business. Prevent war can also prevent invasion, target wars, not do that growth, so the United States are cautious of means likely to work remote. Again, limitation, geography, kind of war will distinguish. As they say, audiences and policy that goes preserve the role of state infrastructure optimistic rely on public support. Now 6, no good policy, we're locked in stalemate, 1.3 to Joker. No good unlikely to do numerous and cause the policy and Thailand's new toxins does not being agreement by the opportunity and action no good policy for your denuclearization. Denuclearization. Let me write word block.
Sure. Okay.
Yep.
Status of everything?
Status quo is always a logical option.
Trade, what card did you read that is a link that NFU is soft on China?
The FUA card that says that making anything that could even be determined as a, well, not anything, but, significant alteration to U.S. military posture that, could be construed by,
Wait,
public.
so you haven't read a card that NFU gets construed as soft on
Wait,
China?
this is also kind of ridiculous. Like, obviously, you read an advantage that's like we cooperate with China,
So
to make China nicer.
this-
Like we
Yeah.
This
have
is
the
a-
advantage
We read
that
it
China
to
work
be
together.
Wait, so you've read an analytical disad?
No, you read an advantage, and then we read a link that says that cooperating with China is bad for domestic political reasons.
Okay, so you have to forfeit the, okay.
No,
Executive
not that you solve.
counterplan.
We don't know that you solve it, just that you try to have.
Where do you think this card defines the term restrictions? It seems to me like it's just using it in context.
I think the Blair card does a pretty good job of describing what restrictions look like in the context of no first use, and says in the context of first use, restrictions will be those done by Congress. I think,
Congress passes restrictions and the executive adopts no first use. Actually,
Um,
I think like defining
that's fine.
the context of the guy who invented the term is probably.
I understand a congressional NFU is a restriction. Whatever says an executive NFU isn't a restriction.
as of now, we've read a one and C card that distinguishes restriction and adopt. Plan says restrict. We think that it requires congressional action. If you want that stuff, we think this one's good enough for now. Read card 2AC, we'll read more cards to answer it.
The good old Rider DA,
Yep.
what do you think must pass legislation is?
Plan.
Elaborate.
Congressional legislation that requires a restriction on U.S. first use that adopts a no first use policy toward.
How do you know that Congress perceives the plan as must pass?
I think, the nature of fiat, the durable nature of the plan, both as well as the expediency of it.
Why won't it ride future omnibus bills?
Because they attempted to attach the ESA rider to omnibus bills and it explicitly got struck off.
The South Korea DA, in what scenario would first striking China improve South Korea's security?
Our impact doesn't say that South Korea believes it needs to be able to first strike China in order to improve security, rather than it needs to have a nuclear deterrent to substitute for the fact that they now believe that the U.S. has abrogated its nuclear umbrella over them. So they believe in a nuclear armed world. They need a nuke to defend themselves because now they no longer trust the United States to do so on their behalf.
The uniqueness counter plan,
Yeah.
Does it give South Korea a veto over American nuclear use decisions?
No. Like if the president were to use a nuke, does it allow them to? No.
Okay. The impact explanation.
Or you started preparing.
No, we have 24 seconds.
Sorry, but
The impact explanation. So, is it just like North Korea strikes first?
It says that the development of a South Korean bomb results in crisis and stability between the two Koreas, and then it says it's likely for either one of them to potentially strike first, and then it goes on to say, China could get involved. I forgot if it says the Russia could get involved, but it says generally adversaries, and it says Japan would also build a nuke, which would also be problematic. Yeah.
No, I'm not. Okay. The order is the advantage 1, which is the crisis stability advantage. Advantage 2, which is the modernization advantage. Advantage 3, topicality.
The executive counterclaim. The rider dissent. The trade dissent. And then the South Korea probe dissent.
In case order was 1, 2, 3, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I should have put the doc up separately.
And my judges are good. Crisis stability is collapsing, conventional conflict is coming, the done and arcadically evidence says Taiwan, the SES, and the EZ are all potential scenarios for escalating. They would escalate because either China or the US would perceive the other to be preparing for a preemptive strike. Conventionally, attacking a US carrier is feasible. Or sweeping evidence says that they have a piece of evidence that we don't have any carriers in the region. We certainly do. Or sweeping evidence says that in a conventional conflict with China, they could feasibly attack a carrier conventionally, and that would create audience costs on Biden to respond. And because of massive public pressure, there would be more troops on a single carrier would die than in all the troops that we lost in Iraq, which would cause the domestic audience costs for Biden to strike. They say not credible. It is one principle. China and the US are both committed to NFU by the debut and dialogue. That's I2. Chinese officials. Regular debates and the intensity by which officials defend their NFU proves it shapes Chinese doctrine. That's done. 3. Dialogue. The plan gets followed up with confidence building measures. That's been mentioned. And comfort. 4. Relations. The plan still improves them, even if incredible. He still looks like an olive branch to China. That's countrymen. 5. No US use, even if not credible. The plan gets no first use, which halves the risk of any nuclear conflict. Advantage 2. Modernization is not defensive or stabilizing. It lowers the threshold for Chinese nuclear use. They would adopt those things because they fear the disarming first strike from the United States. Adopting measures which lowers the threshold for nuclear use deters the United States by lowering that threshold. They say we don't know why they're modernizing. They are modernizing because of survivability, because adopting things like LOW or integrating AI doesn't have any offensive utility. They say no AI launch impact. AI lacks context. A blip on the radar would cause China to attack and dump their nukes on the United States. You don't want to get control of weapons to ChatGPT. They say no LOW. Yes, they would adopt it because it lowers the threshold for nuclear use and deters like US disarming first strike. They say no Indo-Pac war, even if any attacks they focus on other things now, they will start to focus on security. If their near peer competitor starts modernizing, they say no modeling. Conceded argument is that India and China adopt an NFU, but that they begin modernizing in an arms cycle in response to China modernization. Advantage 3, relations don't fail. We know China likes the NFU because they've asked for it and said that they would cooperate over NOCO if we do this. Yes, NOCO internally they would come to the table because China would start sanctioning them and their North Korea's largest trading partner. Biden would work with China. They have read a piece of evidence otherwise, and our evidence that Kevin Snyder says that Biden has asked before. Yes, co-op. Kulaki says NFU is the first step, and co-op and low now is uniqueness for us because we improve relations. Yes, NOCO war. They would use a nuke to gain escalation dominance in a conventional conflict and ensure result of the U.S. Yes, NOCO diplomacy. China is their largest trading partner, so they would have an incentive to say yes if China starts sanctioning them. T NFU. We meet. The plan text says NFU. 2. Counterinterference to be by multilateral geographical limits. 72. No pursuits. Like if they're agreement with one or more governments, unilateral initiative might be general specific. I can find geographic regional. First, multilateral bilateral agreement will be between U.S. and China. Prefer it. 1 picks. Every app they limit out would be a pick under their interpretation. There are more barriers to entry for an entire app than 1 pick. Second is innovation. There are 5 apps under their interpretation, but limit subs and disarm are viable. They make debates in Northwestern, the same as the NDT, which kills education, functional limits, solvency evidence, and powerful generics, strike limits, explosion, reasonability. Vote after range allows zero sustainable debates because topicality doesn't have an opportunity cost to introduction. Conditionalities of voting issues. Use 2C strategy by disincentivizing your best offense, encourages in chasing 1C strategies, and destroys advocacy skills. Dispo solves because they can read multiple advocacies. The executive counterplan. 1, firm do both. It shields because Biden doesn't need to spend PC to pass it through Congress. 2, firm do the counterplan. Their evidence says Congress can pass restrictions on the executive. Not that that's the only way a restriction happens. 2, the resolution says restrict nuclear forces, not restrict the executive. The executive can restrict restrict nuclear forces as well. Restrict does not mean prohibit. So many, the dictionary definition of restriction is limitation or qualification. Plain meaning precedes when the phrase is not a term of art. Nelson and 20. Whenever it's not a term of art, we give its plain meaning. If they win the plan, it has to be Congress. The executive alone is less credible than the full force of the United States Congress. Certainty and clarity is key for China's enemies and U.S. One threat of against China will make sense to clarify and here's viewpoints for change nuclear policy is necessary. Fried change for or else any change nuclear policy made by perception or sufficient overseas must have to make it sure that others is reliable and irreversible. The Ryder politics is sad. Fiat solved the link. Our interprets that the plan passes through least necessary means. Anything else would be extra T, which is worse for the neg and explodes limits. Reject Ryder dissads. Every Ryder's link card is about appropriations riders, which are seen as must pass. Zero evidence ties them to the plan, causes lazy debating. No link will A support the plan doesn't have to be legislation. The approve by affirmative counter plan. B support the plan is not must pass. That refers to funding bills. Hamilton involved the bill does not have the definition of must pass legislation, which refers to funding bills or increasing the limited appropriation bills or must pass bills. Links empirically denied and thumped. We just passed funding bills a week ago, or they'll attach it to the March 22nd bills. Cap 3 8 for funding for shutdown appropriations. Face March 22nd deadline. Feature 6 funding bills Congress must pass this year. Hammer is AFF. Anti-ESA writers are routinely proposed but never attached. Hammer 3 5 defenders celebrate innovation of an anti-ESA writer from appropriation bill. Congressional leaders understand people support the vital law. The writer blocking ESA was protection was legal writers that included every since 2014. No extinction from biology loss area 18. Reduction of species restrictions. That would accept right. There's no left by these even declining species from elsewhere replaced by the losses. No one's forecast the loss of all species by or half out would be a mechanism for the end of the trade station scenario. By losses are not existential. Trade disad. 1. NFU was not soft on China. Sketch was embarrassing. They have to write the link card. Incomplete argument means we get new answers. The Inflation Reduction Act thumbs their internal link theory in 23. The arrogance protectionism creates not only the unlevel playing field for trade, such actively undermines tariff barriers to trade immigration, signals that the power of prioritizing domestic security. This ideology trigger protectionist policy undermine the energy transition. China's EVs are already discriminated against. Tariffs are over 27.5% and don't qualify for IRA tax credits, and tensions keep them out of the U.S. market. Covering 23 U.S. defense period, and looks of Chinese cars, the American tariff of 27.5% is high. Trade vehicles and eligible for tax rates under IRA. Disadvantage against the U.S. tensions have steered manufacturers away. Raising tariffs will bolster the U.S. EV market, offsetting any downsides. Customers 23 by increasing tariffs on Chinese products. Market demand and protecting domestic industries. Tariffs would help the domestic EV manufacturing, which struggle to attack market demand. Tries to turn government to dominate production due to market by using unfair trade practices, fighting self-sustaining raising tariffs on other goods, including cheap Chinese solar products and EV battery packs for manufacturing in the U.S. Their evidence agrees that there are all causes to why Biden would increase tariffs. Combo 118 to protect U.S. domestic industries. Doesn't solve warming. Korea 19. Natural variability is a more likely source of anthropogenic warming. Geological processes contribute to sea level rise. Person percent at 0.03 degrees in warming. Marked at warming. No impact. Oregon 20 effects of climate change. No threat extinction crops. Sensitive to reduction in devil lessons. Increase people still food. Most of America's animal remain areas have increased rainfall. The tropics. Flourish. Plastic for rapid warming. Making those lost by heat of 20 degrees Celsius. Where the European coastal elevation reaches down and notice above temperature. There's only remain large areas which civilization could continue. South Korea prolif. One permutation do both. It shields the net benefit because if we're assuring South Korea in that area, then that solves the link. The counterplan doesn't solve assurances because in the long term, structural factors prevent it from succeeding. The Kim in 24, with dozens of nukes in no construction or repeated launch stream of tests, South Koreans are losing faith in America's battle. U.S. President has said using nukes in South Korea against kill millions without retaliation. Extends for the nation requiring nuclear weapons. So would refer to their own troubles transactionally solved. Which suggests the alliance was transactionally solved. Closer times with Kim demands so go away. Police point of view, jerks about how strong commitment by next out without American first because the express and minds have become a mere scrap of paper overnight sport. It also feels no advancements in Ukraine, showing SOCO even by the nation may say help the country battling nuclear enemy. Conventional solves when nuclear assurance fails. Mount 24 improvements in conventional believes system balance. South Sudan and North Korea benefits progression. South Korean compensate U.S. guarantees. Potential for soul. Take an ally with isolationist tendencies. The president retains soul authority. No ally can be served watchful when used in cases they believe is necessary. Nuclear assurance not only fails for just society who fuels that assurance cannot resolve or provide evidence with an expectation about when the U.S. might use an weapon. There's nothing official to do to resolve either problem. Extended assurances are reliable. No contesting assurance. At cable 123, the go have enough material for 100 weapons and 6 fleets and missiles to launch over Japan. Japan relies on the U.S. for security. North Korea is a serious security threat to Japan and its great size at the U.S. scale to ensure the security for Japan without a U.S. extended deterrence. All SOCO neg link evidence is about North Korea. The plan solved that because we're just with China, but it can cover 23. SOCO will want to make sure signing of U.S. NEG not prevent U.S. from using to define no-go aggression. U.S. NEG pledge not apply to no-go. Nuclear threats cause pro-nuclear factions to believe weapons are the only route to security. Mountain 23. Increasing sales of weapons in Asia may backfire. Fueling proliferation risk by reinforcing the alliance has been an excerpt. Interest of action and such weapons or aliens only increase in allies' anxieties. The bullshit nuclear sure security is often on U.S. theories alliance that depends on nuclear strength history. Bluffing about obvious vulnerability reduces cred. White 19 goes to college. Vulnerability undermines credibility. Invasion allies who is convinced of credible allies believe America's willing to defend over if the America must convince is willing to make their attacks on the threat, perhaps vulnerability when under record legal commitments, is that whistling past radar vulnerability so evidently a reality, refusing vulnerability, U.S. is not willing to accept these risks that undermine the alliance. First strike is in key, second strike solves, player 16, safe on federal Republic committee, among allies, players first use freedom of defense, that there's been discounted no presence, would be reluctant what counts for more, to allies is the threat to retaliate. China mod transit, Kim in 23. Modernization of China's arsenal will be increasing the insecurity of South Korea and Japan. And the Chinese sentiment is high in both advancements will intensify Seoul to be a sense of insecurity instead of consider developing their own nuclear deterrent. China is running the Gulf armament. South Korea 56% shows China's the biggest threat. China's growing capabilities contribute to this trend. Saying nuclear weapons are key, encourages our allies to acquire them. Below this 15, current policy over estimated deals of weapons and growing consume safety. Second ground nuclear umbrella recent studies started to play threat of massive quality in the next decade. Oversight the utility of weapons pretend decoupling magic is attack will encourage well of German trash out release to give up nuclear mission shifting and a few seems to be the next step to increase allies on nuclear weapons by reducing the scope of their mission. I'm gonna send out both of those cards. I'm also gonna blow my nose, sorry. Okay, I'm ready for crossing. Yeah, I'll wait for, okay, sure.
You're easy.
Yeah.
Okay, you good?
Yep.
Okay, so you made an argument that said that South Korea only cares about North Korea. You then read a card that is citing a poll that is like, the most significant security concern to South Koreans is China. Reconcile those two things.
The first piece of evidence says, well, our argument is that the plan solves the second part of those things because we solve China modernization. And then that part says China modernization.
Yeah, it says the word modernization. It's also generally about aggressiveness, but like that also is
Well,
question begging. That's also question begging whether you solve the case. I want you to reconcile like two literal contradictions that you just made. You said only care about North Korea, and then cited a poll that's like they really, really care about.
Well,
China.
I think I just reconciled that they care about both of those things, and the plan solves.
And the plan solves one of them, so because now China's like no longer okay, sure.
Yeah.
Wanted to talk about the writer TA, the like theory argument instead of voting issue, or is it just?
Yep.
Okay, cool. What else was the voting issue? I got condo on to you. What else?
I think that was it. Yeah, that was it.
Okay, perfect. Want to go back to the assurance DA? The map 23 card you read, the line right before like the section where it's like, you know, nuclear assurance over focus on it is bad, is like, as like Lauren Sukin and Toby Dalton say, and then it's citing the paper that the 1NC counterplan is predicated off of. Like, why do you think this is responsive?
Because it says that in the status quo, are you talking about the map 24 card?
No, map 23 card.
What's the tag of that card?
I don't remember. It's towards the bottom of the doc. It's like
the nuclear threats cause pro-nuclear factions to.
Yes, that card.
Well, because that card is advocating for the permutation that we should both improve South Korea's conventional
So I actually
and
wanted
decrease the role of our nuclear.
Yeah, so that's actually what I wanted to get to. Do you think you write a card in the 2AC that is not just we should reduce the salience of nukes, and actually says a China NFU would
Polonius.
Polonius.
Yep.
Can you look at, so I
will read you the line.
Read me the line of that card that says the word China or South Korea.
It's about allies generally, but it does say
It's a historical study,
NFU.
it's a historical study of NATO.
No, I'm gonna read you the line.
Just yes, no, does it say China or South
It
Korea?
does not say China or South Korea.
Perfect, got it.
I'm gonna read you the line though.
No, it's okay. I wanted to go on to
Jeopardize
We're talking about case
national
solvency.
nuclear ambition shifting to NFU seems the next step. Decrease reliance on nuclear weapons by reducing the scope of their mission.
So don't say China or South Korea, don't care. The case, wanted to talk about the India business. India and Pakistan are obviously highly fearful of each other. Why is it relevant if, why is China so relevant if obviously like, you know, both of them have historical tensions, both of them still have nukes, why do they adopt an NFU if they're still fearful of each other?
We do not think they adopt an NFU. Not
Okay.
okay. Our argument is that India starts modernizing their arsenal because they see China modernizing their arsenal, and that causes Pakistan to freak out.
Okay, and why are they not
We don't think they
and
are.
so why is India not modernizing now in response to also Pakistan? Like they don't just have one threat perception,
Well,
right?
neither of them are modernizing now. When they see China start to modernize, India will start to modernize, and then Pakistan will think that's a response to them and start modernizing.
Okay.
But if we stop China from modernizing, then that makes everything.
Okay,
everyone's
so,
got-
relations advantage, does North Korea denuclearize or do they stop testing?
Do you want to take credit for that?
Since we're taking credit, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Just that they tamp down their arsenal to a defensive level.
So do they stop testing?
Yes.
We're going to continue to press on.
Okay. So did you read that? Do you read mine? Yes, I did.
Eight 42. I sent cards. What do you like? Two things. Order.
We had that time with them.
It is so nice to not be in the box anymore.
Was your, like, the room?
The last debate was online. Adrian calls online in a box. Takes their language. Is everyone good for work? Okay. The trade dissent, the ESR counterpoint, or executive counterpoint, forgot what the one he called it. T. Crisis stability advantage. Modernization advantage. Relations advantage.
Remind me where the executive counterplan was?
Underneath the trade dissent before T. You'll have it. Everyone's ready?
Climate change causes extinction, transition failure exacerbates extreme events that coalesce, triggering societal breakdown and fear. It's fast extinction within 3 years. Years 21 of China, right after season. Nuclear possible 2026 or not 20 decades, we're talking now. Or turn to extinction is only extinction risk without all IT. Nuclear research is highest model. And determine how many estimated accuracy surrounding recovery into nuclear, non-climate new wars, not extinction warming. Is the 2AC1 was that the plan is not solved on China. Get serious. 1, the plan causes trade escalation against China. There is universal political consensus requiring hardline policy that everyone you see card characterizes as the status quo, so any move seen as going soft forces compensating reaction. In other areas, the response is accommodating Beijing will be seen as the scaling up of unilateral tariffs. The link is unique. Biden's explicit strategy is to avoid significant foreign policy concessions so China, so GOP rhetoric falls through. That's here. The election filters their defense and provides the opportunity both for Biden to show he's strong and for the GOP to make their criticism stick. 2, pledging NFU and broader stability dialogues, both allow domestic opponents to pay Biden. And soft on China, first 23, so signal there's no use communication with China and the U.S. But continue to push bills for dominance by the state is already criticized by Republicans proposing. Okay, well, they're talking about this clearly what he's foreign policy represents to be some China political. Or sure, how much you do with the ability to change long arms and cut. And the government reluctant to implement NFU. The dictator China would only discuss things in the conflict overall relationship between Central Washington by see Taiwan and native Pacific China's. It votes 3, the lightning blow turns the case A, dependence, backlash against NFU for being soft on China sends a signal of increased U.S. reliance on new stronger 11. The president declared NFU Hawks, Joe Hawks, Joe Hawks, one rights invasion, second president, South security is outgoing. They are to be increased also can be news on the table rather than presenting world opinion uses. Devaluing news domestic health residential last my constant search to draw the opposite conclusion. B. Operational capabilities weak on China backlash prevents operational changes necessary to make the plan credible. For 21, Russia trying to be more efficient, able to declare tension nephew. Without Russia hopes to be meaningless, political present, but in an extent, pushes networks to little to overcome resistance to all support sponsor opponents. Responsible leaders are requiring using weak national security valves. Proceeding in English charts have face that pressure decreases depending on modernization. C. Relations pressure from Republicans prevents concessions and follow-on dialogue tubes. The co-op advantage is Biden wanted to even invite China to the table, which is our 1 and C piece of link evidence. The next two thumpers group them. 1 link shapes uniqueness. We have evidence that says Biden hasn't implemented the tariffs necessary to trigger our internal link, but that he's considering it. It postdates all their evidence by at least a month and it's from January. He has because he thinks he can avoid being paid next week on China, but a strong link changes that calculus to only imposing additional tariffs, tubes, climate mitigation, and lockstep extinction beyond the 228 raising tariffs. With that quite sustainable future, was additional terms for I don't know he's right that's running the U.S. clean energy economy, green jobs numbers, unwanted climate progress, cooperation, knee jerk tariffs, which will continue with the energy terms, dot close reports, drug record with Washington has high solar tariffs everywhere, Chinese imports, critical to help the U.S. national economy, the U.S. signals commercial interest override existential planetary ones attracting other detection from different kind of would be driving goodwill for vital climate action. The next argument about bolstering the United States. 1, no uniqueness for this. They have not read evidence that says that the U.S. manufacturing sector is sufficient to trigger to solve our impact, but we have read evidence that says that the internal link triggers it too. It is not better because it's too expensive. That is the thesis of our argument that cheap Chinese EVs provide consumers with lower options, which is the thesis of the 1 and C evidence whose author name I am forgetting. The next argument about not solving warming. They do solve warming. We've read issue-specific evidence. They marked the card before, but they marked the card after just reading a bunch of random nouns that are all climate change related. Do not give the 1 AR new answers because I cannot possibly foresee what the implication they think this has. They say no impact. 1, warming cause extinction, and every increment C because of invisible thresholds, and 19, climate causing extinction due to non-linear cascade effects, vessels, factors, tipping points, wrong, ice sheet class, cause rapid low rise, driving force, increase fires, oceans, or at least methane producing by the producing one way, using modest forming, so population stress, making extinction likely, more important to avoid by literally a trillion times. 2, causes global instability and nuclear war, which 2 turns everyone is the impact year 21 disrupting, food crate, conflict, safe layer, climate, political systems, driving quantity, displacement changes, germ to resource sharing, economies, and response, fire, particulars, risk of nuclear war, incident trigger exchange, absence of nuclear pursuit, the global system's ability to diffuse climate drives combination, disrupting global injustice and insecurity, increased probability prices escalate, or false alarms mistaken, ESR counterplan, not going for it, concede the permutation, it's a test of competition, concede the card that they read, this is that certainty is key, this magnifies the Lintern's case argument because it says that any misperception destroys total reliability because China must, quote, make sure that the United States is following through on its promises, which obviously magnifies our arguments, topicality. Now, conditionality is good. 1, logic, counterplan bad doesn't mean plan is good. They're arbitrarily insulates the gap from testing. And it also justifies Judge K. 2, neg and idea flex is key to rigorous testing, which falls benefit equity. And ideological education, side bias, bad top, improve, independently causes community systems. 3, risk adversity forces us to make our best arguments. The neg a fallback to encourage research. 4, no impact because the 2 dark collapsing, diminishing utility, and perms. Above speed differences in DAST. Skew worse. 5, counter what we did. It's no more arbitrary than their interp. 6, reasonability conceded on here, non-rest theory. Causes substance crowd out is bad for education. 7, dispo, and other counter-interps all fail. They're condo disguise, arbitrary, forced process and plank span for imperms, and inevitable contradictions which prevent multiple advocacies. Crisis stability advantage. Extend 1 and C1, no crisis instability. China cannot afford new entanglements because they're still reaping the cost of COVID, and their military is too weak in terms of spending and comprehensive power relative to the U.S. Continuing up the ladder of escalation requires confidence, which is something that we've read evidence that says China lacks. At worst, they just deliberately avoid places where U.S. involvement is likely because they won't be able to achieve any gains there. And at worst, again, both sides just agree to diplomacy, knowing everyone that we love won't tolerate war. That's Zhao, filtered through recent predictive evidence, none of this from 2020. So can't assume fallout from COVID, and the cave evidence says China's brandishing places threats in places where the U.S. doesn't have security interests. Here is a card to answer each place with a 2AC list. Don't let them have new warrants in the 1 AR because I would have run cards here. If they said it, nuclear risk over is 0 over Taiwan, McKinney inherits 24 U.S. leaders. Or more than reluctant to discuss China nukes exchange would obviously be evidence, right? Against intervention has been ambiguous, very forced, no extension on Taiwan vessels control, no impact, against intervention possibility, having constituted a turn 100% of experts. Like the kind of invasion regime would have factored the cost of war in the U.S. It's a question tensions are managed in the SCS Code 24 SCS down to the U.S. elevated high ASEAN. ASEAN China islands division code of conduct between China and the U.S. on classified levels for communications mutual. Desire to stabilize relations to prevent tension from polluting netherlands, and not least in the SCS granted actions below force, which calculated comfortably belong to other ASEAN parties silence. This is where they say this word SCS parties seem fully cognizant of risk, especially premeditated conflict will continue to remain mindful of dangers of competition. The other thing they said was like EEZ, who's EEZ, where? I think this is just another SCS thing as based on my reading of their cards, so I don't know what else this means. Extend 1 and C2, no U.S. first use. Scale of the attack and unpredictable political consequences, making a literal non-option for military planners. I am not lying when I say that 1AC Sweeney is a hypothetical. 1AC Sweeney 21, it is not entirely out of the realm of possibility the U.S. could contemplate nuclear use. Say if, say, China was able to sink a single carrier killing perhaps 5,000 Americans, if China did use conventionally armed missiles against U.S. bases in Japan and Guam, what reaction would that spark? Consider the U.S. use under those circumstances. The bar for this scenario is extremely high. Reading 22, the U.S. military would determine China's version and technically stabilize the attention to privilege China's survivability rather than use first giving catastrophic cause of nuclear war and even on certain limited retaliation for trying to generate strong return effect to the U.S. damage limitation bar is very high. U.S. leaders seem to be certain China is about to use of nuclear weapons. The risk of damage limitation is extremely low.
The modernization advantage.
Extend 1 and C1, no modernization impact. It makes the Chinese arsenal more secure, which makes it less likely to see threats to their second strike and accidentally launch that smash throw. Offensive use is first use or survivability, neither of which cause escalation. Extend 1 and C3, no AI launch impact. It is super far off and can only accomplish super niche tasks at an incremental pace. And China would just replace a human, and humans are not instructed to do the blip on the radar, which means they will just develop AI that avoids their impacts. Internal documents through China wants to keep human in loop. See when you're on 23, China has released 2 key position papers in AI. Both papers emphasize the importance of human intervention. Weapon systems AI should always be under the control of humans. This takes less systems to have high degree of autonomy. They're always under human control. Extend 1 and C4, no Chinese launch on boarding. They know it boosts the risk of false alarms. That minimum communication protects them in a crisis because their siloed ICBMs are distinguishable as re-tank. Their NFU is stable even with modernization. Master 23 Canadian China's arsenal coming in. China's banning no first use for retaliation ensure enough weapons to absorb stratagems or careful out ability sense once Congress nuclear modernization consistent with the news. Ensuring nuclear use leaders try to check the deterrent law before giving you some sheet. Best construction sheet triggering capability sense on quality include a quantity. Extend 1 and C5, no impact war, diplomacy and economic focus. Confirm that neither is focused on modernizing to the extent that it causes wars or impact evidence assume COVID or electoral changes that R says matters. That's Krug. Min at Extend 1 and C6, no internal link to this. India and Pakistan hate each other, not China. Pakistan's conventional inferiority means they have to modernize and India needs to compensate domestically, which ensures arms race imposed plan. It may be about adopting and if the warrants obviously still apply, which was done above. The relations advantage. Extend 1 and C2, no North Korea internally. China cannot stop Kim from anything. They need economic benefits from trade, so they can't afford to sanction Korea. But North Korea is also an expert at sanctions evasion, blunting China's ability to do literally anything of import. I implore you to carefully read Kansas's 1AC during prep time. Their cards say that cooperation would influence negotiations and perhaps enable us to pursue denuclearization. But none of that says that North Korea meaningfully changes its posture post-plan. They can just evade sanctions. Brasco and Q33, North Korea manufacturing commons both exist. And sanctuary North Korea gets these parts of dark borders, North Korea border, China, Russia, the means. But they're good through the major cross the road, also listen to networks in Southeast Asia, transfer. Those get the sense whether 1 or 3 stands low, preferred divided minutes, last thing 1 and 2, 5 Korea, turn in a blind eye. I'm actually, except 1 and C5, no North Korea war. Kim doesn't want a war because it would literally kill his entire country. Testing does not equal willingness to escalate a conflict. Their evidence amounts to a statement that because he's tested a nuke, he wants to attack the most powerful military in the world, which is obviously ludicrous. That's the Lewis evidence. Finally, except 1 and C6, no North Korea diplomacy. Biden needs to keep his hard line amid more pressing issues in Middle East and Ukraine. The only answer was that we didn't read a card. We did. It was Swam. Are you ready for cross-checks?
Yes. We read a piece of evidence that says that tariffs on Chinese EVs are at 27.5% in the status quo. What do they go to post-plan?
I don't know. Our evidence says that they would be high enough to block the United States from decarbonizing. We read evidence from last week.
But 27.5% tariffs is not high enough.
Correct.
What do we, like, double it?
Probably.
Okay.
Well, to be clear, I think
We have evidence that says that the extent to which, I don't remember what the executive, okay, to be clear, Biden had announced that he was thinking about it. I don't remember the exact number that Biden said that the executive was considering, but our evidence is written in the context of a Biden proposal that's been floated since December and says that that would be sufficient to block decarbonization.
Why are tariffs at 27.5% sufficient to solve warming, but at 40%, suddenly we don't solve global warming?
I think the important distinction is that the 25 or 27% tariff has existed for, I think, almost 6 years now because these are the original Trump tariffs.
Right, and American companies keep buying
Well,
stuff.
no, not at first they didn't. So they've recuperated from that and have re-engaged in economic engagement.
Yeah.
It's taken time to reintegrate.
Okay,
We're
your
really doing the tariff measure
Palmerlo-
that works, obviously.
Your 1C Palmerlau evidence says Biden will increase tariffs to protect domestic industries. What card says being tough on China is the only reason Biden would increase tariffs?
The thing you just said, that protecting domestic industries, and then the next question is from what? From China. We've read evidence that indicates that trade compensation is the way that Biden avoids the label of being hard on China. The thing that he needs to maintain for the election
But why
is the
does he
ability
want
that
to-
he's safeguarding U.S. jobs from Chinese exports.
But why
Which is
wouldn't
what
he
our
do that
evidence says
incentive?
it causes.
If it helps his election change.
Because we read it, because he doesn't have an incentive to like piss off China in the same way that he doesn't have the incentive to like, you know, do
Well, but
tariffs.
that's
But our
incentive.
evidence says that it is a necessary
The Rust Belt.
compensation measure that he's already considering.
He has an incentive to win the Rust Belt. Why wouldn't he do this just to boost his populist, help
We've read evidence that says, we've read issue-specific uniqueness. We've read evidence that says that Biden thinks that he can win enough about China, particularly like in the context of the State of the Union, where Biden like made statements about the threat that China poses and has been very focused on foreign policy very recently, which obviously because this wasn't
that seems like a
but
that seems like a
no,
non.
it says that it confirms that Biden does not perceive the need to escalate the trade war in an attempt to be strong on China.
Okay, why are U.S. Buying EVs key to solve global climate change?
Our evidence says that it would result in the decarbonization of the U.S. economy because it allows the United States.
The whole
to be
U.S.
offered
economy, U.S. goes to net zero.
That literally we've read not one but two parts that say that.
How does it stop countries like India and China from continuing to produce emissions?
Well, one is that it benefits the Chinese EV industry, so it would probably be mutually reinforcing and allow
what's
China
the timeline for all
down
this?
that path.
Like, how long does it take for the U.S. to get to net
Our
zero?
evidence says it would be very quick.
What piece of evidence says it would be very
Yeah,
quick?
sorry, I need to check something.
Yes, sir. Too easy to pick this up.
But
We did all kinds of work. Now it's time.
yeah, but like you read a card, your 2AC card was like sea level rise is a thing. Come on, like that is not an all causes argument. That is our impact.
The writer DA in South Korea.
Can we prep for 2 seconds?
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, 10 minutes.
We're done.
9:51.
Sorry.
We're just talking about it.
I told Graham I like your hair.
We should talk about it?
I was not.
Yeah, writer in South Korea. Kansas, you all good?
Yep.
Panel. Perfect.
Oh, wait. Can I ask okay, 9:51. Did you read McDonald?
I sure did.
Okay, sorry, 9:48.
We're good. Yeah.
Concede body defense, not going to go for it, no offense. Writer theory, not to reject the argument, not to reject the team, not going to go for it, solves this argument, reject the argument of the team, no deterrence things, and classify stuff from condo. South Korea. Drop South Korean proliferation towards the peninsula, cascades to Japan independently. Japanese miscalculation that causes nuclear conflict, conceded in the 2AC, no takebacks. Everything starts nuclear war due to arms miscalculation that's known is also quick and easy. Drop that is late and it'll be fast. It comes happens in 6 months. That's when it's the average. No pros defense. Afghanistan strikes cause rollback and extinction. Jackson 22 computer grade injuries. Who are there's operation capability for China committed Afghanistan strikes. Leading to high nuclear levels raising emergency testing for different gases to the okay strategy to consider retardation to China's nuclear capability. The counter target strike. Relationship turns everything vaccinated to China. Lost in devastating arms. Instability and escalation camp 23. South Korea's independent capability to China's turn facing some of their opposed. And will do whatever is required for increase also prevented from happening. Now, 2AC1 is for to do both. This fails. This will be largely on 2AC2, but even if it kind of went assures Korea somewhat, the inclusion of the average bridge too far. Push 16. 90% third contradiction to the U.S. Possesses wide and non-nuclear options and education use waiver from community. Direct use for worst case choosing no. NFU should not suggest the U.S. nuclear use not. Remove NFUs too far. The U.S. mitigation is higher Korean consultation on the terms not. The literary security eyes threatened by adversary now. 2AC2 is prolif now. 1. Taiwan solves the threats. The Needle survey confirms that Koreans desire more conventional salience in low stakes issues, which China is not, and having more input on contingency planning than Sukin. 2AC functional concession is a TKO here. All 2AC linkers are reducing nuclear salience is good, not unilateral NFU towards China good, which is kind of resolves the plan is not. Now 2 is polls. This sucks. It just says a few polls happen. No good how recent those were conducted, what parameters exist or why this haven't happened now. Why it hasn't happened now. 3. The Washington Declaration threats the needle and domestic pressure from relevant moon. And 23. Pro-new forces being the trouble of the new path that unions which would be American non-public domestic. A new commission Washington Declaration offers very trying to exit institutionalized local the U.S. new positions, enhancing pressure to the U.S. The strategy win-win with friends, relevant, strength, and deterrence, not the endgame says. A beautiful voice was constantly started hedging in case so good to know. A new short period to make it hard, but party cheese back to the bottom. 4 is that support for presidents been trending down while accounting for all their self-worth. 24. Washington Declaration first time leaders that after December talk establishes strategic strike with planning for nuclear contingency in India. Computer service plays driven AV states are relatively different small not have nukes. And somebody might see nuclear something on the level that national restored asymmetric alliance. And also what even necessary you ever feel like in certain terms of Bruce's. And the Washington Declaration, your opinion, favor self-armament, declining support. Was that ties in 71 and 2021 and ties 2022 was and 60% in 2023 considered a no-go system of publications became more frequent and analyzes decline. The need to test a new cars or you could not have significant public opinion. 5 is credible commitment to display relative for experimental data that simulates nuclear debates over one-off surveys. On 20, the paper uses experiment methods in the survey, and voters' preferences will be different existing polls. Let's assume voters say this divided from 30% against carbon emergence issue. Voters will post information opinion against or increase the 60% change. And the significantly observed in weakening the experiments to be careful in response to proceed. Like here, something for reduce the convention weakening opinion is the likelihood to favor 6. The other point is Trump, no SSE wins, Black Swan Summit, etc. 8, NCG, the 7 is the NCG insulates the alliance from the next 24. Authorities sent a member talking to the NCG or to trade the extended difference. As if these future consultations get up from his pressure to resolve to Trump, her admins appear speaking on the process to prepare who's in office emphasis to issues like agrees with major difficult reverse. Also 8, the Cameron obviously solves it, it's truly fiat. The Trump can't roll back now 2 theories conventional solves 1, linked is percent 2. In this mount card says the NCG is qualitatively different from existing insurance, and also thinks the Cameron solves this mount 24 moved to like until this most promising technical qualitatively different existing insurance because directly addresses concerns not had input and actively to would like very nuclear on nuclear options because the alliance in addition to nukes a straightforward US would renovate existing mechanisms to ensure that not contain not only nuclear but also officials from across the agency emphasize conventional capabilities for each conventional can no longer work with the creative peninsula work. And on 23, calculating when it's from the peninsula. Actually, no, sorry, scratch that card now. 2C4 was North Korea testing argument 1, uniqueness answered in the above 2 case. Bruce they cannot solve this argument now. 2C5 with North Korea is the critical thing. 1, drop the flip-flopping link. Washington declaration, calm pro-nuclear voices, but requires stable and consistent U.S. nuclear posture of the pen. It's a policy 180 to both from the blue that gives nuclear advocates the upper hand in Korean domestic politics, allowing them to convince Korea that nuclearization is the only way to ensure security now. 2 is the NFU link. South Korea sees as accommodating China makes us willing to stomach conventional invasion, which they will not. Nuclear weapons are the only then option for Korean security. That's Harvey. They will not trust China and outweigh other factors in Korea Bravo. 20. NFU that comes to the arcade, no matter if U.S. research or common. The conflict for U.S. NFU pledge with China is trying to contribute a role in the region of weakening the NBT, Korean difficulties for allies, the U.S. umbrella part to waiver by Chinese declarations of views, so that expect to hold a major crisis. Now, 2 states was nuclear threats are bad. 1, this card is answered by uniqueness and elite arguments above. 2, is it cites our solvency advocate obviously solves this an issue with 2C mount as assuming they don't have argument. Now, 2C7 is that nuclear bluffing is bad. 1 is this. It fails to say the word Korea challenge to South Korea believes in nuclear compellence against China. The plan upends that Ivory 424. Alex Mazoga received resources through Washington declaration where a radical change in the policies that Alex had required independent nuclear power. Purchases are firmly grounded in the totally help possession of the trust of Venezuela. So believe China no go can be compelled. Believe that nuclear compellence can reduce risk for breaking that copies of switch. And 3 is the mutual vulnerability to NEG argument acknowledging it inflames Koreans our perceptions is perceived as bowing down to Chinese demands and a huge downgrade the resolve seen. 22. U.S. vulnerability with China turn cost for South Korea perception China taking aggressive actions over Yellow Sea. And 8 is still have the concern China will become prerogative, worry about the China North Korea South, become concerned Washington on this community intervening conditions of peninsula, China objects back to Chinese race and concern about U.S. movement Korean border. The U.S. Peninsula, even though New York being on target for Chinese nuclear attack. Now 2C8 was first used not key. 1, evidence is too old and unspecific. 2, it's answered by the link. 2C9 was China modernization. 1, answered by uniqueness link. The case arguments and it never said it is sufficient to cause prolif. 2 does not say 2 is that it disproves a no-code link sequence that was processed. Now 2C10 is but obvious. Answered by everything else above. Too old and again does not say the words China or South Korea so you can scratch out your flow because RDA is highly particular. I'm going to read another card under bluffing bad. Even if mutual vulnerability is reality, declaring it is fatal for American credibility. Cost 22 allies. Readily much of the vulnerability of U.S. vulnerability of course U.S. The forces of the allied are based in the homeland or sitting in the homeland. The U.S. vulnerability even if defense is not available reality of U.S. allies. The perception U.S. acknowledges vulnerability ending declaration that even with extensive consultation comes to the price goal of your Chinese friends growing receiving declaration as a sign U.S. vulnerability resist threat as a last for decoupling. Now the impact turns North Korea, let's say that. Left for 17 new government Germany so goes alliance with the U.S. Beijing with the Repko zone North so we need Europe that has incentive to strike first so go would be vulnerable also turns Indo-Pac so Russia for 14 China Russia no go and others was use of nuclear breakout proliferating nuclear weapons from the United States the U.S. expect Beijing. I won't think it's a word.
948.
Like the warning thing, or the like, the notice said like 250 because it's supposed to pick up time. So they've gone to go.
325. That's 10.
I sent it document.
Oh,
It just has the little no.
There's a difference between, stocks as well.
Does everybody have in stocks?
Yeah.
I'm given an order. 1, 2, 3. Trade yet.
Full of jokes.
It's all for all I can do.
Vamonos. Let's go. Let's give a speech, please. Well, it's been a while. All right.
I'm gonna have a bite of my apple. Is anyone not ready?
Oh, we're ready.
U.S.-China war is imminent. Great power clashes in Taiwan and the China Seas cause uncontrollable escalation. U.S. status insecurity and China's rise makes both sides conflict prone. Their defense is unfounded optimism. China's rebounding from COVID, and all Repko states that China is not overconfident, and at best it's only a matter of time before they get their forces together and modernize. The U.S. is weighing conventional advantage makes us more reliant on nuclear weapons. Bikini says deterring China over Taiwan is incredible enough that it won't happen, and China would use nuclear weapons because it's of existential importance. South China Sea war is likely because of conflicting territorial claims, and it's not predictive. Yes, first use the NPR emphasizes early use for strategic effect. Audience cost box of the president enforce asymmetric escalation. Sweeney is speculation, but so is all their DAs. Damage limitation is probable because the U.S. will state Chinese conventional force movements or steps to ensure survivability as preparations for a first strike. Room doesn't assume the targeting revolution, which magnifies counterforcing capabilities. Advantage 2. Modernization does improve survivability, but launch on warning does not. Prefer specificity. Yes, AI impact causes glitches and false alarms because an automation bias makes leaders too trusting of algorithmic recommendations. China won't keep a human in the loop. Their moon is not predictive. Yes, China launch on warning, they don't assume the threat of a disarming first strike, and it would deter damage limitation, so they want to do it. Low is compatible with, and if you word is at least ambiguous, so they could argue that it's compatible, which their ev doesn't assume. I can see no Indo-Pac internal or impact advantage 3, not going for a casino Korea war. They deleted their own prolific impact trade. Yay. The overview, if extinction happens in 3 years, it's too late to solve warming. Nuke winner is certain because nukes would hit cities. That's what you see. Broadway McDonald is too exclusive to testing. I'll answer Turn's case really quickly. They dropped the plan is credible, shared faith in the nuclear taboo, and audience costs to deter rollback. That's where I evidence. Sanctioning trade is the status status quo, so China would not perceive it as causing rollback. Operational changes are not key to any part of solvency because China's only asked for declaratory, but durable fiat means that congressional backlash can't gut the plan in any meaningful way. We're not going for relations, so turning that doesn't matter. The IRA thumbs and protectionist blew up threw up barriers to trade like preferential support, and the U.S. has had tariffs on Chinese imports for years, which is Ferrera tariffs are 27.5% now. Frank issue Kentucky has no F quantifying how low tariffs need to be to solve existential climate change. If companies are still buying green tech from China at 27%, why not 30%? Their UNEP says tariffs don't help, not that climate change will be solved at current tariff levels. Drop down costs us to raising tariffs. Tracy Kessler says buying will increase tariffs on Chinese projects to protect domestic industries. Or wasn't that those domestic industries solve warming? It's that they give Biden an excuse to tariff China, whether he's soft on China or not. He would do that regardless to help his election changes. They dropped a rehighlighting of the link ad, which agrees with that. There's already pressure and they don't sell fast enough to its into 28. Senators called on increase tariffs on Chinese imports. Finds addition to reach 50% clean electricity by 2030. Their Garrison Ard says the next 3 years are key. Increasing tariffs by 10% is not sufficient to solve global climate change. Decarbonizing the entire U.S. is infeasible and takes forever. Decreasing by 0.1 degree is not enough warming mitigation to outweigh the case. Curry says natural variability makes warming inevitable, and they've dropped that argument. There are new evidence that it solves us from China. Daily.cn. Warming is inevitable, which we've already explained. There's no impact. There are temperate areas where we still have food crops aren't sensitive to increases in temperature and yields are resilient. That's Org 1 and beer does not see human extinction, no warming, conventional liberation, incredible state of the bodies ever. That climate change translation found their big foods, proves that effective countries going to this very long of drivers are still development are more influential. There was a 99% decline. That's all from disaster more through levels as well as equal. But the Netherlands adapted card is marked at adapted, no conflict, national change, more harder rights, influential economic economic development, activities in the state and quality history climate, just low levels of common drivers and experts who this after this unsurprising given divergent research findings. Korean Day. Right. Reading KU cards against us in the overview is a voting issue for shamelessness. Durable fiat solves rollback. Preemption stays conventional and solves pro-left. Also, no one preempts China because China is deterred and North Korea's military is anemic and they won't face conflict as for their arts. Can't turn modernization because there is no chance that South Korean nukes would threaten Beijing's second strike, which is the impetus for mod. Do both. It's good enough to shield the land. Consultation shields at one. We would consult them over the plan and persuade them it's a good idea. Two other issues. Future consultation smooth over overall abandonment fears. Their Bush F doesn't assume consultation and is about North Korea. Inevitable, that's TM1. Future actionlationist soul will nuclearize the hedge against the future Trump cutting them loose. Washington Declaration fails because it could be discarded by future admins. Same with the counterplan 2 no-go. And nuclear advances in the U.S. mainland and undermining the lifespan 24. Well, the RK trusted deterrence things have changed. She said, insurance and the liberation of constantly raise questions of whether the RK trusted the U.S. will respond to nuclear use of doing some attacks against the ESP intense or the RK citizens question the nuclear like him. Actions say this immediately after the SHs get accurate on the viability of the ROK. The ROK U.S. alliance threat is all snapshot, does not answer structural trends. Their Dalton evidence isn't about first use, which is the threshold for any of that. Arguing against that, their mount recutting is an advocate for the perm, not rogue tests. Now, extend or control link turn. States fear being sucked into rash, U.S.-driven nuclear war. Robust surveys prove allied publics are less hawkish than the U.S. and will relative to secure defense autonomy. That's stupid. The counterplan doesn't solve it because it doesn't give them a veto. Hutchinson evidence is about extended assurance in general, not first use. The Sukin Nika goes AFF because it says that we shouldn't discard assurances altogether, but the plan doesn't do that. The threat of first use is the largest driver. Sukin 20, only 12% of the research active nuclear first right part. More of the limited nuclear cycle, limited nuclear strategies, vectors of the initiate unnecessary nuclear conflict. Actors must support proliferation when actors who don't watch nuclear use better. Allocating proliferation of nuclear who occur in nuclear weapons individual business weapons will allow more light issue control because escalating individual nuclear demonstrate breaks echo and in other words it would more likely to as work will becomes common Russian nuclear acquisition fears on sovereign defense now salience link turn perpetuating the fiction that allied security depends on nukes and powers pro-nuclear factions. That's now their Moon-Shin card is AFF. It's highlighted to concede pro-armament forces are on the rise and the declaration was a band-aid. Only NFU solves it, which is our fellow Pitus evidence by. Now, there's also a bluffing internal link, threatening nuclear use in response to conventional taxes so grossly disproportionate that it undermines the overall credibility of any of our alliances. Retaliatory guarantees are the threshold for the link, not for use. That's terminal defense for between allies who lose the deals with first use. Our special efficient nuclear ability offer production with the unlimited actual use force of the most destructive security guarantee imaginable use of the assurance rests on the certainty of reach on that. Any belief and then first use above stuff answers their mutual vulnerability link. Declaring mutual vulnerability is good. It's an objective fact. Not acknowledging that just prolongs it and it makes like the U.S. makes it look like the U.S. is delusional and won't make good on its promises. We're conceding that there's no Indo-Pac, and we're also conceding that there's no no-go war.
Okay, 842.
Yes. Did you read the Sugan?
Yes.
You were just for the control one though, not the second one. There's one under the you didn't read the sales link turn card. Correct.
You're the one under.
No, that wasn't easy. I did not read the stupid card that says public opinion matters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you read the internet? Okay, there were a couple cards. Turners. I should put my pen down. Get the timer before I get order. We're all good for order, right? Yep. Korea DA, Trade DA, the Crisis Ability Advantage, the Mod Advantage. Mouse. Sorry, I used to have my laptop here. That card's weird. Sorry. Getting the impression everyone is ready. Yep. Great.
South Korean proliferation guarantees nuclear conflict. There are multiple vectors that are all conceded. Japanese follow-on, North Korean, and Chinese preemptive strikes all guarantee and risk of South Korean nuclear launch if successful. All guarantee nuclear launch. It's fast. Conceded evidence says that it can happen within months, which means they can't go for time frame on the case because all of their impacts require sort of the development and rapid and escalation of a crisis that doesn't currently exist. It would definitely take out planned solvency, which means that they can't win the case as a hedge to the DA either, because the United States would be completely incredible in a world where it now has a patron threatening China with a nuclear weapon. It guarantees Chinese posture shifts according to one in our Jackson. It results in Chinese launch on warning, which directly turns the only terminal impacts that they've extended to the second advantage. It would also certainly result in a nuclear crisis in that context, guaranteeing U.S.-China nuclear war and accessing the terminal impacts to advantage one, but because the United States is painted as irresponsible and destroys the credibility of the plan, because China must increase their alert levels and a crisis is likely to ensue as a result. Stupid voting issue, don't even care. Free Solve's argument is obviously not embedded in our argument about U.S. credibility, because it is not about the plan literally being rolled back, but its signal becoming incredible in a world of the plan not turning modernization. Arguments obviously disproven by the piece of evidence that we have read, because South Korea is perceived as a patron of the United States, which means it undermines the plan's credibility, while simultaneously making them likely to think that we are going to first strike them in the world of proliferation. Next is the counterplan, which solves every leg turn and uniqueness concern. Every AFF card is salience bad, not China and a few good. This is not a consult counterplan. It does alter the status quo, increasing existing U.S.-South Korea contingency planning in advance of a nuclear crisis, but also increasing the salience of conventional options in response. The success of that has never been contested, so you must assume absolute solvency, but it's entirely distinct from merely consulting about the plan as they explain the permutation. You should hold the line on the per explanation, because we heard one and see solvency evidence. They dropped it solved, and they said the word term to both. None of that amounted to answering an argument, but it's impossible because they dropped one in our Bush and Cosmo, which are explicit. Korea desires the counterplan, but still cares about its substantive outcome. It sees China and a view as bridge too far that directly puts its security at risk. Which is broadly embedded within sort of our broad linked arguments that I will do later. The next arguments are about uniqueness. The one in our Bennett evidence, our evidence post-states it and assumes it. It specifically dropped one in our Ivor that says that Korea still believes in the U.S. nuclear compellence. Dropped polling evidence that says that the public is not yet supporting, and that the Washington Declaration resulted in a significant decrease in support for South Korean nuclearization, which would be overwhelmingly sufficient. The plan would certainly upset the balance, which means that uniqueness is not offense for them. The plan increases the likelihood of a North Korean conventional invasion. In the eyes of the South Korean public, it emboldens pro-nuclear hawks within South Korea that can irreversibly then call for nuclearization as a replacement for the U.S. deterrence, which is an argument that has not been answered. They do not have defense, but we have defense to the link turns in the form of the counterplan, which means that the link must outweigh the They then read like a work card, which concludes that the process could fail but depends on substantive outcomes, which means this quote, the counterplan assures to succeed with the link proves it won't when error work. 24 much. So how the process produces less than some outcome expectation to be dash. The uncharitable refer to the Washington Declaration 70 dash expectations lead to displeasure. The next argument that they make is the state's fear entrapment. They dropped a consultation link that says that Korea's response to entrapment was to double down on nuclear planning in the context of the United States. The plan abandons that form by adopting no first use policy. We've read uniqueness evidence that says that was contextually contingent, contextually enough to avoid the risk of proliferation, which is our moon and our limb evidence from the 1 and R. The salience link is obviously solved by the counterpoint because the counterpoint increases the salience of conventional weapons while avoiding the perception that NFU results in U.S. drawdown. The card that they read is about public opinion. In 18 and 19, 1 AR Circuit 20, the 2018 data and the 2019 data. However, the next argument is the salience link turn filtered through uniqueness in the counterpoint. Bluffing link turn is not relevant because the counterpoint increases the likelihood of conventional options in response, but depends on the credibility of the plan.
I think if they do the mutual vulnerability.
Yeah, mutual vulnerability link. 1 in our cost flow indicates that declaring mutual vulnerability, even if statistically correct, it cannot be perceived as credible in the eyes of the South Korean public because our evidence indicates that it would permanently cement U.S. weakness in the context of the region and undermine credibility on other matters by admitting that we are dead. Trade deal. Not going for it, concede, no link, no offense. You should filter the rest of this through the 2AC card that set the threshold for case solvency as requiring U.S. absolute reliability and lowers the threshold for argument zeroing the case because KU set their bar at any misperception or suspicion. The link certainly turns the case and was conceded. A is dependence. The GOP jumps on the plan to increase the call for dependence, on nuclear threats, which undermines its credibility in the eyes of the Chinese and guarantees the ship to launch on morning, zeroing case solvency. B is the capabilities argument, which is our piece of Perkovich evidence. It says that the United States would increase nuclear modernization post-plan, which undermines the credibility of the plan because we now have first-use weapons. It specifically takes out advantage too, because it means that we still have the ability to threaten a first strike against China amid China hawks calling for it in the world of the plan. The crisis and advantage. Extend 1 and C1, war is constrained. Our Zhao evidence says that China will deliberately avoid places where war is likely, which means in the SDS and Taiwan, they will not do things that arise to the threshold of use of force and invite U.S. nuclear response. The SDS, part of their argument is relying on Vietnam and Cambodia, who are newsflash, not U.S. allies. So there's no guarantee of nuclear weapons there. There's no Taiwan impact they've conceded to the United States. Instead of forces, patrols, or a defense pact, we're not likely to use nuclear weapons because the catastrophic risk that it poses, that's McKinney, SDS impact is solved by ASEAN, and conflict discussion deliberations they've conceded are likely 1 and C2 for no U.S. first use. The scale would be unprecedented. We don't think that we could achieve damage limitation, but we also think that conventional weapons are likely to sufficiently solve, and because of uncertainty, retaliation ensures that Squonky and repaying. Modernization advantage. Extend 1 and C4, no Chinese launch on warning. They think it increases the risk of false alarms, but their current posture is consistent with their willingness to absorb a strike, even if they haven't, because they don't need to use it. When that is the case, that's repaying. Extend 1 and C3, no AI integration. Our evidence says that it is super far off, and we have read evidence that cites Chinese defense white papers saying that they always think that they need a human in the loop in order to achieve deterrent stability. 325.
Okay. I don't know. I didn't know. I figured it out. Thank you. get the right burger?
No.
Okay. This looks delicious, and I want to eat it, but I think I would, so I feel bad. I guess I should hold off.
Advantage 2, advantage 1, I'm sorry, that's modernization, and then crisis stability. The trade disadvantage, and then the prolif disadvantage. Okay, ready? China will adopt LOW and continue to modernize its nuclear arsenal because they fear the risk of a disarming first strike from the United States. Otherwise, they have the only argument that Kentucky has advanced is no AI integration and no China LOW. They have conceded the slew of evidence that we read in the 1AC that says that China fears a decapitating first strike from the United States. Even if that doesn't actually happen, as per their arguments on crisis stability, our evidence speaks to China's perception that they fear it's going to happen, which is why they would do things like modernize their arsenal and adopt LOW. None of those things have offensive utility, but they do have defensive utility because they lower the amount of decision time it takes for them to launch a nuke because they don't have to turn on the weapon systems or determine whether or not their systems have actually been hit on the ground. If they see a blip on their radar that causes them to launch their nukes, even if they always, I'm not going for the AI integration stuff, but I am going for the LOW scenario that if a launch, as soon as they see a blip on their radar, they'll assume that the US is attacking them and instead launch their nukes at the United States. To reduce decision times, this is either an accidental or an intentional launch. If they think that the US is about to imminently first strike them, it is much faster than their scenario because if China adopts LOW, a blip on their radar could happen tomorrow and cause them to launch all of their nuclear weapons. It certainly outweighs the disadvantage, which at least takes multiple years or months for South Korea to get a large enough nuclear arsenal for other states to want to preempt them, or they would do it secretly, etc. I'll do more of that on the disadvantage, but the only argument they've advanced their response to disadvantage is no Chinese LOW. They dropped it would be consistent with their NFU, or that China thinks it's necessary for their own security, so they would adopt it regardless, even if they view that there's some risk to it. Now, the other advantage, I'm not going for it, concede that the US and China will never intentionally get into a conflict, but if China thinks they're under attack, then that causes them to launch their nukes at the US. The trade disadvantage of the plan is credible. They dropped all of our words for why it is credible. Our potential evidence says they would be, that dialogue would happen with China in the follow-up to improve the credibility. Our I evidence says that both the US and China believe in the sanctity of an NFU, so if some random senator is just ranting about the US launching a nuke at China, China obviously wouldn't perceive that as credible as long as Biden and China are on the same page. And as the relevant US diplomats, that capabilities argument, the affirmative has always been a declaratory NFU, so this capability stuff is nonsense. We don't change any of our capabilities because we still need to threaten first use against countries like North Korea and Russia, which our evidence says that China doesn't care about because we're both on the same page and are clarifying those things in discussion. So the threshold that we set that any conditions or whatever does not link to the affirmative, even if it is a low threshold, because we've met that threshold as per all of our solvency evidence. Now, the proliferation is at. First, I'm answering Turin's case. We're denying the link to this argument, so Turin's case is not relevant if we reduce the risk of a link. It's not fast when they decide to proliferate. We said China could adopt LOW tomorrow and cause them to launch their nuclear weapons. It doesn't make the plan incredible. South Korea getting nukes would be perceived as them bucking the U.S. alliance, not nuclearizing with its consent. The history of U.S. non-prolif actions and promises to get South Korea to not proliferate should convince China that they aren't doing it with our consent. It doesn't turn modernization. The threshold one I said was that whether or not South Korea proliferating threatens China's second strike, which is a small arsenal that South Korea wouldn't do, so China wouldn't have any need to modernize. The alliance collapse is inevitable. 2 imminent shocks to the alliance. That way, the link prolif is inevitable. 1, future administrations. Trump's America First brand of isolationism was a massive shock to East Asian allies, shaking down allies for burden sharing, openly disparaging Taiwan. South Korea knows it's only a matter of time before a new populist will come into office and cut them loose as part of an isolationist posture that creates powerful incentives for them to proliferate now as a hedge against abandonment. Here's a direct quote from 2AC Kim. Quote, no matter how strong a commitment Biden makes makes now, if America first becomes the next president, Biden's commitment can become a mere scrap of paper overnight. That is a direct refutation of their institutional ties argument, which is their one answer. They're one presidential term away from being discarded. Trump could put the Washington Declaration into the paper shredder just like he did with the INF and Paris. It's also true of the counterplan because Trump 2.0 could just stop consulting. Secondly, is North Korea. Our commitment will look like a bluff if Kim can get a nuke to the U.S. mainland. The U.S. can't credibly threaten to sacrifice Seattle to save Seoul, given the asymmetry of interest involved. That's why your Bennett and Tracy Kim. Their anxiety over the North's wedging strategy is pervasive and growing, which is why a supermajority of the public wants their own arsenal. 2AC Bennett says that this will, quote, undermine the viability of the ROK-U.S. alliance. South Korean politicians are calling for nukes, and Prolif is domestically popular. Those political incentives means it's only a matter of time before a future administration makes a run for the bomb. 3, RF is better. Their cards are just FYIs about summits or half measures that claim extended deterrence is fine. For now, that's a snapshot. At no point has the negative introduced a piece of evidence forecasting the structural trajectory of the U.S. ROK alliance into the future. Even if the Washington Declaration decreased allied support for Prolif, that was transitory. A band-aid solution doesn't predict future trends. They say the survey from 2018 or 2019, no impact to this argument. It's structural, not a snapshot. The counterplan cannot solve it. Increasing the salience of conventional options doesn't reduce their anxieties about being entrapped in a U.S.-driven escalation. We could still get nukes even if we resort to conventional measures first, and we've agreed it doesn't give South Korea a veto over things like nuclear launch decisions. Permutation do both. Solves should shield the link. The 1AR said, explain consultation, said that the consultation, that we would convince them through the consultation that NFU was a good idea and convince South Korea to go along with it. Some officials not liking it is not sufficient to proliferate. They have several pieces of link evidence that say that officials wouldn't like it, not evidence that says that they would literally proliferate. Secondly, second strike solves. 2AC Blair speaks to both elite and public opinion and says key allies don't think first use is critical to their defense. The plan doesn't get rid of the U.S. nuclear umbrella. It re-clarifies it to be more realistic and credible to allies. 1AR Thacker is also comparative and says the reason the allies care more about retaliatory threats is because if the U.S. actually used first, the security guarantee would be self-destructive, and that no ally wants the U.S. to go to war with China. Their 1NR pain evidence just says that Korea opposed it, not that they wouldn't proliferate. Continuing to bluff reduces the credibility of our assurances. Nuclear use against conventional attacks would be disproportionate, so we can never convince allies we would do it. Maintaining the threat of first use against countries like China just makes allies feel like we are overconfident, not that we're a confident guarantor. To the extent that all of these things improve, all of these link trends as well as the counterplan improve the notion that South Korea is increasing, improve the notion that the U.S. will protect South Korea. That's just a recent permutation to both shields, and it means you should get rid of the counterplan and makes the disad non-unique because all these things are going to increase South Korea's, notion that the U.S. is going to protect them post-perm.
Good debate. I'll have a card knock out in 3 minutes.
Yes.
Or I lied about 3 minutes.
30 seconds.
just sent the AFF.
Thank you.
check. Congratulations to both teams. The decision is a 2-1 for the negative.
I thought I can go first. I voted that the risk of the launch on warning was more probable and the time frame was quicker. I feel like that the prolif debate is, in my mind, weighs toward inevitable in the status quo. I felt like the cards that said that like the Washington talks and negotiations were solving this also actually indicate that there is a level of franticness and kind of uncertainty to the point where I wasn't sure what the impact was if the counterplan solved. I feel like the permutation means that you could potentially do both, and that there is the evidence that said that it wouldn't compete wasn't actually very viable to me. And I felt like the AFF wins a better time frame and better scenario on launch on warning. For me in this debate, I need some better explanations of impacts. I also felt like, and this didn't obviously have anything to do with my vote, but and this is kind of a side note, but for both teams, there are places where the evidence highlighting is not good. You all need to be very, very careful about the integrity of evidence. The one card that was the most problematic for me was actually the affirmative evidence. There's a 1AR piece of evidence that gets read where the verb twice is eliminated, which actually grammatically changes the meaning of the sentence. It doesn't get used in this debate, so it's like not a big deal, but that's problematic. Like you can't change the grammatical meaning. I can tell you the card later if you want to make sure you change it.
Sure.
I mean, I can tell you afterwards. Like I said, it doesn't affect the decision in the debate round, but you all need to like watch that. It's become a really bad habit in debate, and at the level that you all are debating it, you don't need to eliminate like 2 extra verbs. You're fast enough and have plenty of time to say all the arguments in the card. So I'll tell you which card that is in a minute. But in terms of the decision, that was the basic gist of my decision.
So sort of thinking about the broad strokes as I first started, and what I would say certainly won't hold in every NFU round, but in this round, I've sort of felt like a lot hinged on length versus link term, and I'll just unpack why that's my premise, and then kind of explain how I evaluated the disad. I just think the impact of the disad is sort of understandably uncontested or under-contested, and it's huge. There's this external Japan thing. It's sort of hard to reconcile if they were to get on ahead on the direction of the disad. Like, tough to vote on what remains of advantage 2, plus I actually gave them a little bit on their impact beyond advantage 2. I could squint, and maybe like, cook up a scenario where you're in good shape if you don't win the direction of the link, but just the events in the world of the disad seem to be a very, very complicating variable for the 1AC and have external things that are not good. Doesn't mean that you didn't put up a good fight on the uniqueness in the link turn, but I'll kind of get to why I resolved those for the NEG. So to begin with, I just don't think the NEG, the affirmative, did enough debating on the counterplan. The counterplan is clever. I mean, I sort of agree with the 2NR that like its effort to resolve the uniqueness arguments is sort of posited with a card in the 1NC, and I think that card is designed to kind of create this Goldilocks sweet spot argument, which suggests that absolutely there are threats that are emerging in the SQO as described by most of your uniqueness cards, that there's incentives for South Korean prolif, and I just don't think there's anything from the affirmative that implies that weaving in the counterplan's gesture towards conventionals doesn't go a long way towards the assurance that your authors are worried about in the status quo. And on top of that, I mean, I think the uniqueness was a fair fight either way. Maybe I do agree with Heather that in a world where the negative didn't have the counterplan, the affirmative would be ahead on what the affirmative characterized as structural uniqueness arguments. But I think that none of that assumes the world of the CP, and that's, I think, a real problem. Maybe even more problematic is that, for sure, on all the link turns that relate to the broader theme of salience, I really like the counterplan's capacity to resolve that. Those cards, to me, read as concerns that exist in Seoul that relate to the exclusivity of the nuclear option, and I think the counterplan alters that calculation, and their cards, like I thought maybe they were overselling them, but they actually say that like that sweet spot would go a long ways towards resolving some of your link terms. That's a little less true of bluffing. Like I think you have something there. I'm not quite sure how weaving conventional combos into the U.S. South Korean dynamic, remedies the question of whether or not the U.S. would really sacrifice, Seattle for Seoul. But I do think the counterplan helps a little there. It definitely is assuring. And then I just ultimately thought that the way in which the negative link evidence was so perceptual, it was very, very helpful. And I thought the active negative link evidence was especially strong, even though I've judged a bunch of these debates, I would say it was, at an 80+ level. So the argument that gave me sort of the largest pause was whether or not the gestures in the world of the counterplan, even if durably fiated, sort of mirrored the negative zone twist when they were like answering rollback claims on dissent turns the case. And sort of the parallel there is like, sure, the CP gets permanently fiated, but the perception that Trump may win would mean that no one believes it. They have a card which tries, might not be quite as good as the AFFs, to intimate that there are efforts to try to weave into these consultations something that Trump proves them, and maybe in a different 2AR you could use that to say that the permutation overwhelms the link. But in this instance, I thought that helped. I wasn't 100% sure that Trump was going to win, by the way. And, I felt like if you get to permanently fiat your app and then you get to permanently fiat the NEG, that NEG was in at least decent shape on uniqueness and very good shape on CP solves the link turn and very good shape on the link. And when that all came together, I just thought all the events in the world of the dissad outweighed what remained of the LOW advantage on the case.
Because I guess I don't really get why the counterplan solves the like structural uniqueness stuff. That's like the resolve stuff, like the white evidence, like the credibility stuff. That's like you wouldn't trade Seattle for Seoul, or the like.
It's not as good at that. Yeah, the counterplan's not as good at solving that one. It's much better at what I would describe as salience-related arguments, for sure.
Okay.
Okay.
But you didn't think that was enough to get the dissad low or make South Korea like kind of inevitably nervous?
I think all right, in saying that the counterplan solves the salience arguments better than it solves the Seattle Seoul sacrifice arguments, which I think are basically bluffing threads. Can we agree with that characterization? Okay, I don't mean to imply that the bluffing threads were like 100% for the app. They answered them for one, all right? And for another, they read a card that is on point and intersects with a bunch of your uniqueness authors that says that it's quite reassuring when the United States comes to the table and is like, BT dubs, here are all these conventionals that are going to become part of the conversation. I mean, to me, logically, okay, and I don't even think I'm making this up for the negative, because the negative sort of took all of the link turns and said they're all complicated by the world of the counterplans. And I mean, doesn't it feel like a lot less of a bluff in the world of the CP? Like, I mean, it feels like the United States is assuringly having the back of the South Koreans in a way that is distinct from the solely nuclear option. So I don't feel, I don't want to come across as like coming down anyone else, but I don't feel as though your bluffing arguments are divorced entirely from the negative thesis that all app link turns are about nuclear only and don't assume the infusion of conventionals into the equation. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, so maybe I didn't articulate that well enough. But yes, logically, I agree with you that first blush read, your link turns in a post-round speech document that are about salience are sort of DOA because they are about the salience of nuclear vis-a-vis conventional options. The bluffing argument is stronger of the two link turns to go for, but I don't think it's entirely divorced from the premises that I've put forth. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, yeah, fair, yeah. And the reason the perm didn't overwhelm those things was because you thought their link was like so hot fire.
No. Well, I do think their link evidence is great, but then I thought the first card in the 1NR that's like BT dubs, perm doesn't overwhelm the link. I thought that card harmonized very well with the elements of the counter plan. And I did sort of just drop this in there a little bit, but I do think there might be hope for a different perm shields argument, which is like, if these consultation mechanisms, even could be a uniqueness overwhelms argument, are being Trump-proofed. I mean, because your Trump non-uniqueness argument is pretty good. I mean, that card reads pretty well. And if what they're doing in the world of the counterplan / whatever is happening with Trump-proofing in the status quo is sufficient to make that AFF card go away, then there is potentially an argument about how the whole negative thesis, counterplan included, might overwhelm the link. But that wasn't the thread you were tugging on in the 2AR. You were just sort of like, the perm, if it gets assurances, double bind, then shielding. And I definitely think they posited a link argument that assumed the world of the counterplan.
Fair enough, that makes sense.
It sounds like I was maybe closer to Heather's decision than Repko was, but I'm definitely very close to Repko's decision. And the best way I can kind of frame my reasoning is, like, I have these arguments, like, for fun when we're in van rides and shit with our kids about the concept of try or die neg, and I feel like this round is a phenomenal example of what I kind of put in that bucket. So I think you're winning a decent risk of the launch on warning scenario. I think your Rip Gang card is like really bad in the mod context because all the unhighlighted say, yeah, okay, so you're on top of that. The Mastro Ev, I think, is consistent with their spinning it as intended to be defensive, so that's not very helpful either. You need, the best card I've seen on this question is a Talos 22 card, if you can find it, like, that card is fire, read that instead. All right, I'll hurry up, it seems like y'all are on top of that. The bluffing thing, like they do, just the only detail I will add to Repko's discussion of that is like they do have a pretty good card that's like reality or perception matters more than reality, and like that intends to answer your argument, which is surprising, among many surprises of negative being like much better than I expected. I think that your Trump stuff probably thumbs if Trump wins. That's obviously probabilistic, but like, you know, there's not much discussion of that. So I'm like, okay, let's imagine a world where Trump wins. I think the way that they're talking about the, you know, political backlash, Rex, AFF, solvency arg on the other dissad is like an extremely similar story. Like those definitely interact. And I think that there's some chance, but certainly much lesser chance than if Trump were to win, that could, you know, make the launch on warning stuff inevitable via incredibility. So that's already like kind of mitigating that a little bit. But I ended up assessing the link is so large that like I know as soon as the plan happens, because all of this shit is perceptual, that like we have 6 months until the impacts. Your time frame arg is not really a fast time frame arg, it's really an invisible threshold arg. And I think like I can let you win like almost all of your claims, and I still live 2 months longer, given that the election is in November and 6 months from now is September. And that is like, honestly, it's like, I can give you so many things about inevitability, and the risk of the link is so high, and the risk of Trent's case is so high that it kind of doesn't matter in the big picture. Now, there's a lot, I can go into a lot of detail about individual cards and all that, if you would like me to do so. I thought I was gonna have to go first.
No, I get the try or die neg stuff. It's just kind of like.
I know it's an absurd argument. It's just like I don't know what else to do. Like
vote AFF that like their dissad's not unique.
This is the fight that I had, right? Like Carly, for example, is like try or die can never go neg for precisely your reasoning, and I'm like, but like it happens either way. But there is a differential.
I don't know. It's also just like they're not really like saying try or die neg or like all this shit's inevitable or like
no, they're just winning a dissad happens and probably turns the case.
And probably
the counterplay might solve it. Right? Trump might not win. Like, there
Yeah,
are
no,
reasons, right? But I was saying, in the worst case act scenario, there is a justifiable neg logic, even though I agree with you, it is the suspect logic in many situations, right? But when you add in the like, well, what happens if you don't win all of the maximal versions of those claims? Well, then the negative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I get what you're saying. Yeah. Philosophically, I mean.
Yeah, no,
But
I know,
I do have,
I'm
yeah,
with you.
yeah.
But yeah, it is ultimately still probabilistic. It's
Yeah.
not like a certainty about all that calculus. It's just worst case scenario is your like best version. Like your best version for voting AFF is literally like, why not? And it's like, well, I guess 2 months would be the literal answer to that question. I understand it's not a very persuasive answer, but like it isn't 100% of all of those factors, right? It's less than that.
So like, to change the app strategy to kind of unwrite that RFD, do we just need like more link defense or like not go for non-unique against disads like this?
That's a great question. I think like you can win if the counterplan doesn't solve all those link turns. Like you can just straight up beat the counterplan. You could beat the link, like with defense or something like that. Like I think like that decision calculus is not inevitable by any stretch. It's a product of like the degree to which the link was large and the degree to which Trent's case was large. And that was, I thought, like partially a product of evidence in the link question more than the Trent's case question, but also partially a product of debate. So yeah, I don't think you're doomed.
Deal. I think I've asked my questions of my adjudicators as they were talking. So thank you all for putting up with me and answering my questions.
No.
Do you happen to find the piece of evidence that you thought was?
Yes. Yeah, and I felt like there was one that I didn't love for the NEG either, but the one for you all is the Sukin 20 evidence. This is in the 1AR, under the control, 1AR control, Sukin 20. There's 2 places where the verb were is not highlighted, and it actually makes the sentence say something grammatically different than what it says. Obviously, it doesn't, like I said, doesn't get used in a debate, but I would hate for you to like get called out for that.
Yeah, I will flag this.
Yeah, so make sure you get the verb in both of those sentences.
Okay, and then I think that's, do you have any questions for me?
No. I just forgot my question.
Okay.
Oh, I guess, do we think that like, because one thing I was thinking about before the 2 hours, like whether it's worth time spending whatever I spent, like 30 seconds on the China trade DA, or just like doing more defense to advantage too, because I felt like they kind of achieved a dual purpose. Would time, I mean, given like McCaffrey's thoughts and my own personal feelings about the quality of our evidence on the launch on warning question, and like, you know, perhaps what seems to be a, you know, very relevant to the things that I did there, is it better worth my time to just put that back on advantage too and not go to link terms case?
Well, if you had a time machine with 30 extra seconds, you got some hot viz on LOW that you didn't stab any.
Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think the nature of that, I didn't sense that when you were on LOW that there was more that was in the block that you wanted to get into the 2NR column that you didn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there is one argument I have a question about. Like,
Okay.
so one thing I was thinking about was like, our arguments on advantage 1 that are like crisis instability. That
Yeah.
it's like there's not going to be a crisis between the United States and China.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be justified for the 2NR to apply that to the miscalc launch on warning impact and be like, there's not going to be a thing that causes China to launch on warning?
I think kind of, maybe you didn't connect that to LOW in particular, but I think you leveraged that in the second advantage gem.
Okay.
You know.
That probably that is, I felt like maybe probably it could have been clearer. That's not having any States in China. Makes sense.
Would it be justified for the
Okay,
two
that's
to
all.
apply that to the
I have a
launch
couple
on warning impact, and be like, there's not going to
This is mostly about my decision. I didn't think about it. Maybe you didn't connect that to LOW in particular. It seems as though Kentucky, in reading this kind of plan and propagating the reaction to unique cards that they sense that you're going to win, has you on a particular 2AR against that is a non-uniqueness linked term.
This is mostly about my decision. Maybe you didn't.
If you don't feel like you have to go against the counter plan, Kentucky, and you had a time machine, why negate the value of the counter plan to resolve non-uniqueness claims and just go instead for South Korea will never proliferate.
That makes sense strategically. I think our EV set and like the truthiness of that argument is
Yeah.
a little bit worse than they will proliferate in EV.
I
But
love the,
strategically,
let me see if this makes sense.
Yep.
I'm gonna rank these things,
Okay.
okay? Non-uniqueness against the assurances disad without a counter plan. A, too unique against the assurances disad. B, non-uniqueness in a world where I don't have an answer to the counter plan that remedies my uniqueness argument. C. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yeah.
So your truth claims are contextual in my opinion, and unless you think you can get them off of the counter plan, I do think the counter plan is doing a lot of work to rob you of your best threat. And running the debate backwards, I think that's what Kentucky was aspiring to do all along. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
Think about, you know, they make a pivot, it opens up some opportunities, it closes some, and we're gonna take door number 2 over here, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe like no impact.
Yeah, okay, and I don't mean to only say too unique. Yes,
Yeah.
it could be a different thread entirely.
Yeah.
But you were very, very heavily invested in a uniqueness thread that, in my opinion, had a complicating plot twist to it. Does that make sense? And so let's just make new plots. Yeah.
Yeah, I think no prolif runs into the buzzsaw of that Pardo article.
Oh, yes, I don't want to intimate you haven't had more debates on that than I've judged on that. And there are plenty of teams that have gone for no prolif and lost because it doesn't assume the world of the link, essentially. But I love what you said even more, which is like, could be no impact, could be some other thing, you know what I mean? But I didn't think there was enough adjustment to the world of the secret.
Could we have brought up this North Korea impact defense stuff?
What do you mean?
I can see the no military impact.
Yeah. So I just think, what is the brought up?
To minimize the impact of the dissent?
Yeah.
Yeah, but there was other impacts of the dissent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay, I understand.
I mean, unless you're trying to weave it into like some sort of other theme on the dissent. Do you think the only impact that they've read to the dissent is about North Korea?
No, but I mean,
Yeah.
if we can get,
Yeah. Could that help your cause? Is that what you're asking?
yeah,
Yeah, I think it helps your cause.
probably cuts the impact in half.
Hurts one of the impacts, yeah. Yeah.
Well, then the impact of that is NOCO or China, which we should say that the plan solves, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I agree with him conceptually though, that like the thing that he just said about no prolif and no impact of prolif, like what you said, if this happens again.
Okay.
The tournament advantage
Thank you.